Jan, can we do this some other time? Jaco said to the hooded figure. Boss, look at this guy, disturbing my sleep. The hooded figure chuckled. There's no one here to help you, he said. I have come here to settle a debt. The man raised his arm, revealing a scimitar underneath his hood before pointing it towards Jaco's face. It glistened under the moonlight, showing its incredible sharpness. One of you, Dragonborns, bested one of ours. I have only come here to prove that it was not you who won, but one of us who failed. And I am here to correct that. Michael watched this scene unfold from the sidelines. Jaka is facing the Stone Cold 2, meaning he's the second best soldier in their group. And he wasn't even the only one among them who was approached by a hooded figure. On the other screen, Michael saw Amisu sitting in a mostly empty library as a hooded figure approached her from the shadows. Oh no, Amisa muttered under her breath. What about the books? They're going to get destroyed. The hooded figure stopped in the middle of her tracks as she saw Amisa look in her direction. This startled her for a little bit before she chuckled. Impressive for a demi-human, the hooded figure said. I didn't expect much, but it seems that 5 lost for a reason. The hooded figure took off her robe, revealing a long frizzy hair standing up above her head that was tied up into the shape of a giant number 3. We're going to have to fight, you and I, she said. Amisu shook her head. Oh no, what about the books? I'm going to destroy them. Just then, Michael's soothing voice came out of the shadows and reassured the anxious Dragonborn. Really, boss? You're going to replace them? Yipey. Stone Cold 3 looked at Amisu with a strange gaze. She thought that the Dragonborn was crazy, talking to no one except the empty shadows. Of course, Michael was behind those dark spaces in between the shelves. Master, there's one more hooded figure, Fudge said, pointing Michael's attention to the last rectangular screen in front of him. This time, the vision showed a jungle-like scenery outside of Angora City. Underneath the foliage of the trees, Michael saw a couple of evolved red mankeys camping under the stars. They gathered around a campfire, with the sounds of crackling firewood echoing in the woods. They seemed to be quite exhausted after a hard training session, with some mankeys massaging each other's backs and polishing their weapons. Just then, a twig cracked in the distance, alerting the red mankeys of an intruder. TSK, I thought I would be finding something valuable once I followed you guys here, but it was all for nothing. You're just a bunch of mankeys. Not worth my time. A large, burly man draped in a hooded robe came out of the woods and approached the apprehensive mankeys. His tall height and the obvious muscles underneath the robe intimidated the small mankeys. Please tell me there's a dragon born among you, the hooded figure shouted. The red mankeys eyed the intruder before slowly grabbing their weapons from the ground. Come on, really? No dragonborns? It seems I wasted my time. I'll go back to the city now. Just as the hooded figure turned around, he suddenly felt the hairs on his arm stand up. His instincts flared, making his muscles contract and flex before he turned around to face whatever monster was hiding behind him. But when he looked, there was no one there except the red mankeys. Ho ho, I may not be as talented as those dragonborns, but I would like to think that I can keep you company for a little while. At least, I think so. The burly man, codenamed for, scanned the red mankeys before his eyes, set onto another hooded figure standing unassumingly in front of him. If he hadn't spoken up, he wouldn't have even noticed him. Who are you? For asked. I'm just a relic of the past, young one, Grieve muttered with a laugh. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Michael stared at the 4 screens in front of him. That's 4 of them, he thought to himself. Originally, there's 6 of them, but Zion already defeated a guy named 5. The Shadow Orcs are facing 6. Jaku is fighting 2. Amisu will battle 3. And Grieve will engage with 4. That meant that there was only one other member of Stone Cold 6 left. And coincidentally, it was the strongest member of them, all codenamed 1. If they were trying to defeat the Dragonborns in public to declare themselves as the superior company, then it didn't make sense why they wouldn't send out their strongest fighter. Unless he has a bigger mission. Michael's question was soon answered as suddenly a large creaking sound echoed around the walls of the castle. Everyone turned to the gates and saw the drawbridge slowly lowering back down before smacking itself onto the stone brick roads. On the other side of the castle walls, A beautiful adorned carriage bigger than anything they had ever seen came gracefully crossing the bridge. It was drawn by 4 chunky horses that seemed to have eaten nothing but whey protein. The carriage pushed through to the inside, forcing the guests to move closer to the castle walls. Who is that? Wait, that emblem looks familiar. It's from the Hephaestus Company. Even their emblem is made out of Damascus steel. I wonder how much they had to spend on the dwarven black market. The Duke had to stop his test drive of Michael's car as he waited for the rude guest who came way too late at the party. "Show yourself," Duke Stelmane demanded. The coachman walked over to the door and opened it, bowing before the owner stepped off. "We have arrived, young master. The party is delighted with the arrival of the leader and owner of the greatly touted Hammerstone Company." The young master stepped off the carriage, showing himself be a very young man, about the same age as Michael himself. This young master, wearing a black and gold tunic, waved and bowed to the guests looking at him. "Greetings. I am Christian Hammerstone, the proud owner of the 495th ranked company in the entire world," he said confidently. "Pardon me for my late arrival. I have come from the Hephaestus family estate, you see." The rest of the guests whispered amongst each other, not expecting to see the owner of such a successful company be so young. While everyone was looking at Christian, Michael looked at the man beside him. It was Stone Cold One, the strongest member of their group. It seemed his task was protecting and serving their leader rather than fighting the Dragonborns. Christian then walked over to the Duke and bowed to his presence. "Duke Stelmane, I hope that you consider my offer. Our company is the best there is. I am sorry to say this, but there is no one better than our company." He then looked at Michael. "Excuse me of my methods, but I have sent out the very best of my men to defeat your employees. It is nothing personal, and it is only a way for the Duke to realize who he should accept as the sponsor." Michael ignored him and looked down at his shadows. The Dragonborns were there, listening to what was happening. "Do you guys need any help there?" Michael asked. The Shadow Orcs, Jakku, Amisu, and Grieve all had smiles on their faces as they looked down at the shadow beneath their feet. "Are you kidding me, Master? This is what we're made for," the Shadow Orcs muttered. "I'll finish this in just a minute," Jakku said, yawning. "Master, teach that arrogant prick a lesson," Amisu whispered. "Ho-ho, you can leave this to us, Michael. Such an easy thing, ho-ho. Did you just say that you'll finish the fight in just a minute? What does that even mean?" The hooded figure, codenamed Tu, looked at Jakku, scoffing at his indifference to the situation. "I'm the real deal, boy. If you think that just because you guys defeated one of ours then you could beat me, then you'll find yourself sorely wrong. I am Tu, the second strongest warrior in this city," he declared. Tu finally took off his robe and showed his bald head. The man was wearing a similar icy blue armor as showcased by Five, but this armor set seemed a lot more special as its very structure was filled with intricate details of snowflakes made out of a unique blend of metal alloys. Its durability was second only to dwarven equipment. Even his scimitar looked unique. "Do you know what this weapon is made of?" he asked Jakku. "If you were a little bit more interested in metals, then you would notice that the edge of my blade is lined with none other than Damascus steel." Tu proudly announced his weapon's greatest quality. Its strength, durability, and sharpness were not something that an ordinary bum from Angora City could appreciate. "Jan, are you done talking? Let's fight already." Tu gritted his teeth, annoyed at Jakku's arrogance. He bent his legs low and burst towards Jakku at high speeds, with his scimitar above his head. The stone road beneath his feet cracked as it reached below 0 degrees Celsius, brought on by the natural icy magic of his boots. Even at this point, Jakku was still stretching his body as if he had just awoken from his sleep. Just as the scimitar was about to slice through his jugular, a sharp ting resounded in the empty road as Jakku's sword seemingly teleported right in front of Tu's weapon. Tu's eyes widened as he stared at Jakku's sword, which seemed to be crackling with intense lightning and electricity. "Frozen Cleaver of the North," Tu shouted as his scimitar increased doubly in size as ice particles covered its very body. A 4-star spell was not something Jakku could take lightly, so his feet began to burst in electrical energy as he activated his skill, Step in the Lightning. Jaku's entire body morphed into pure electricity, allowing him to zap away from his position up towards the rooftop of the building in front of him. "You won't get away from me," Tu shouted as he cast Titanic Ice Age, morphing large ice formations under his feet almost 10 meters up, allowing him to jump up to the bricked rooftops of Angor City. Tu jumped from his ice structure and brought down his scimitar to Jaku, which was quickly parried by the Dragonborn's quick sword strikes. The usually empty and quiet skyline of Angora City was disturbed by the sounds of metal clashing against each other, sparks going off and falling from the rooftops. Tu's skillful mastery in the scimitar allowed him both power and speed to completely outclass Jaku. He fully expected the Dragonborn's sword to be chipped by now after all their clashing strikes. Yet there was barely any scratch. "What the hell is that sword made out of?" Tu shouted in frustration. "The same as you, but better," Jaku replied. Tu felt insulted at his response, taking out a white pill from his pockets and before swallowing it whole. His face scrunched as he felt the power tearing through his stomach. But after bearing through the pain, an unprecedented magical resource became readily available to his body. "Tough luck, Dragonborn. You are facing a 5-star master of the scimitar. And with this cultivation pill, my strength has almost reached the 6-star realm." Tu's entire body began to turn pale and white as a cool aura oozed out of his body. It wasn't long before his skin turned bluer and bluer, before turning into a dark blue similar to the color of the ocean on a dark night. A cold mist radiated out of his body, spontaneously creating snow in a 10-meter radius around himself. Northern Blade, destroying ice. As Tu brought down his scimitar, pieces of stone bricks exploded as an invisible gigantic blade crashed through the rooftops, creating a large gash that destroyed 3 homes in succession. Crying and shouting resounded through the night as the citizens heard the disturbance in the sleep. Jaka materialized back from his electrical state just a few feet away from the large gash. But just as his feet landed, he felt an impermeable cold rush through his scaled feet, trying to trap him into place as another invisible sword crashed towards the rooftop. Tu smacked his lips as he saw blue wisps of lightning zap out of his attack. And before he could try to locate Jaku, he suddenly felt a tingling sensation near his ribs. As he looked down, he saw Jaku duck down with his sword in a swinging position as he tried to slice through his icy blue armor. Blood spurted out from his side as Jaku's sword flashed in a single moment. Tu gritted his teeth before raising his scimitar to bring down icy fury towards the Dragonborn. His scimitar slashed through a large part of a tailor's rooftop, slicing off a large chunk that slid down into the ground, smashing into rubble. Despite the destruction, Jaku escaped as fast as lightning. "Stop running away," Tu shouted, haphazardly swinging his scimitar and creating chaos around the peaceful neighborhood. With each swing, his scimitar barely missed the lightning Dragonborn, hitting nothing but stone walls and bricked rooftops. Unfortunately, one of the disturbed citizens was caught unaware as he ran out of his house and into the street. Just then, a large chunk of wooden planks crashed down towards him. But at the very last moment, a streak of lightning flashed towards the old man. Blue light flashed before the wooden planks turned into cubed pieces, falling down into the ground harmlessly. The old man turned around and saw Jaku protecting him with his arm above his head. Thank you," the old man muttered. "Huh, caught you now." Tu jumped down from the air and held his scimitar in both hands, ice and snow peeling off its very blade. The 4-star spell, Frozen Blade of Kuthra, was a very fast slash that even Jaka wouldn't be able to react to. But Jaka didn't even look back. He only assured the old man of his safety. Just as the scimitar was about to split his head in half, an invisible prismatic shield clashed with the Damascus steel blade of the scimitar. As the snow particles tried to cut through the invisible shield and turn it as brittle as a sheet of ice, just lesser unity defense used fire mana to completely melt the mana trying to cut through. The clashing of the two created brief sparks of light as their mana particles canceled each other out. What the hell is that defense? Two screamed out. Once the old man ran off into safety, Jaco turned around to face two. His eyes were calm and unburdened. He had one hand on the hilt of his sword, and one hand holding a chocolate bar on his mouth, which seemingly came out of nowhere. As Jaco consumed the chocolate, Tu felt his control over his scimitar become less and less powerful. He felt the invisible shield trying to actively eat through the Damascus blade itself, tearing it into metal shavings. Impossible. Sorry, Jaco said as he raised the katana in the air. It was only now that Tu realized that his sword was completely different from the one he wielded before. This one was glowing light blue, seemingly made out of pure lightning itself. Your 1 minute is up. Jaco swung his blade, lightning buzzing around it, and created a huge gash from Tu's shoulder to his thigh, flinging him 50 meters out before he crashed into the city walls, burying him in the rubble. Stone Cold 3, codenamed 3, stared at Amisu with a wide grin on her face. In the midst of the confined space in the library, in the midst of all the books and scrolls stored in the shelves, Amisu's spear held no advantage whatsoever. 3 had specifically hunted down Amisu in this place because their preliminary investigations upon the Dragonborn showed her as timid and shy. She loved reading books so much that they knew she would hate it getting destroyed. Meanwhile, this would be the perfect place for 3 to showcase her unique skills. It's such a shame, 3 muttered. If your company weren't in the way of Hammerstone, then I think we could have been friends. 3 raised her feet and thrust it in the ground before a mechanical click came out of her tight-laced metal boots. Then a sharp, thin blade came protruding out of her soles, creating a much deadlier version of ice skates. Snow whirled, she muttered as she bent down low on the ground and swept her left foot around in a circle. The metal blade left behind an icy residue that began spreading all around the library indiscriminately. The frost permeated through the wooden floorboards, slowly spreading upwards towards the walls. Its sub-zero temperature, coupled with its magical properties, allowed the ice to somehow freeze fire itself, creating a flaming ice sculpture that allowed the oil lamps to continue providing light in the library. The very few readers in the library ran out screaming as they felt the coldness almost freeze their legs into an icicle. Soon, the ice spread through the wooden shelves and books, turning the library into an icy, desolate landscape. It wasn't long before the entire floor of the library was nothing but a slippery tundra, perfect for 3's ice skates. Strangely enough, though, the only thing that remained in its original condition was the small patch of wooden planks underneath Amissa's feet. There seemed to be an invisible circumference around her that actively fought the frost from permeating towards her. 3 then took a white pill from her pockets and swallowed it whole. Power coursed through her veins, momentarily turning her vulnerable. But after a few seconds, the side effects subsided and her strength increased substantially. I will not underestimate you, 3 said to Amisu. My respect for you Dragonborns compels me to bring out my very best weapon in my arsenal. On 3's hands were 2 identical rings, each one on her middle finger. It was all made out of gold except for the blue gem on top. Except this wasn't a normal blue gem at all. This was a mithril relic. 3 ripped out the 2 pieces of mithril relic from her rings and inserted it onto the flaps of her tight-laced boots. And as soon as she did, the blades underneath her soles glowed a bluish tint as an explosion of water and air mana permeated the air, creating a stronger frosting effect. Yet, as 3 prepared, Amissa barely moved. She kept the grip on her spear tightly as she looked down on the frozen ground. You guys did all this to scheme against my boss? Amissa muttered. You guys. As she repeated her words, her voice became stronger and stronger, becoming rougher and rougher. Amisu dropped her spear on the ground and descended into the shadows. A second later, a completely new spear emerged, and just from the handle alone, 3 could feel its dominating presence fight through the icy tundra. The frozen floorboards around Amisu began to melt into a puddle, just from the appearance of this spear alone. That glow, that strength of a mithril artifact, 3 saw Amisu's green spear glow brighter than anything she had ever seen. In comparison, her own mithril relic skate shoes were like a candle in front of the sun. "My boss, Michael," Amisa muttered as she took hold of the spear. 3 had a bad feeling about this and immediately dashed towards the Dragonborn. Her skate shoes glided on the icy floorboards easily, allowing her speed to increase faster than on foot. She weaved through the shelves with quickness, disappearing and reappearing from Amisu's gaze. She kicked one of the shelves, sending frozen books towards Amisu's way. The book barely grazed her scales. 3 continued to grab books as she glided in the library before tossing them in the air and kicking it towards the standing Dragonborn. Amisa began swinging her spear. At first, it was slow, missing a few books and letting it almost graze her scales. Then, as her momentum gathered, her swings became faster and faster, allowing her to create a furious gale of wind that deflected all incoming book outwards, letting them crash into the wall and shattering into a million ice crystals. 3 sped up her skates, running toward the wall at top speeds. And as 3 reached the end of the room, she raised her feet and began skating up and towards the ceiling. It was as if gravity was flipped upside down for her. But in truth, the ice particles in the ceiling felt a magnetic connection to 3 herself, making skating on the ceiling a possibility. 3 reached the metal chandelier in the middle of the room and used her sharp skates to cut it from the ceiling. The heavy metal object imbued with frost magic began falling towards Amisu. 3 followed, right behind it as she jumped from the ceiling and kicked down towards the chandelier, increasing the weight and speed of the object. Amisu stood there unfazed on the ground. She kept swinging her spear around her body, gathering momentum, even though there was nothing there to defend against. And as the chandelier was about to hit her, Amisu looked up and showed a fiery rage towards 3. "You dare scheme against Michael?" she screamed out, creating a deafening sound that made 3 subconsciously plug her ears. And as 3 looked down again, she saw Amisu raising her glowing green spear and thrusting it towards her with anger and fury. A huge gust of wind immediately shoved the frozen chandelier back up towards 3, impaling her with the piece she had broken. Paradoxically, 3 felt the wind grow stronger as it hit her, propelling her and the chandelier up towards the ceiling and completely bursting through the other side. 3 vomited out blood as she broke through the second floor of the library, with frozen wooden planks bursting out into splinters. The furious wind from Amisu's spear kept pushing her out into the ceiling before she burst through the rooftop, sending rubble and brick out into the air. 3 felt the wind knocked out of her. She looked down with her eyes completely wide open. Tens of meters up in the air, she saw the library's rooftop completely blown wide open. And in the hole beyond the roof, she could see the second floor where she had burst through, and even beyond that, she saw Amisu with her spear still directed towards her with anger and fury. 3 was helpless as she soared in the night sky, taller than any other building in the neighborhood. Then she slowed down, just for a moment, before she came crashing down like a meteor. She sustained multiple broken ribs and bones from just that one thrust alone, giving her no power to even deflect the chandelier as it was falling down over her. She crashed into the stone road, cracking it into pieces. The chandelier buried her deeper, sustaining her even more injuries. "No way," she muttered under her breath. And before she completely lost consciousness, she saw a dark blue dragonborn approach her with the most casual attitude. "My sister's quite scary when she gets angry," he said, putting his glowing katana on his shoulders. She recognized him. It was Jakku, supposedly the strongest out of all the Dragonborns. Codename 2 was supposed to deal with him, but seeing as he was still unharmed, the result was obvious. With her consciousness fading, she realized that Hammerstone Company made a massive mistake in crossing the Reborn Company. They were in the same levels as their seniors, those elite fighters serving global corporations. 2 large explosions in close succession rang out around the city, alerting Codename 6 to the disturbance. He looked back, seeing the sight of a woman falling down from the skies with a large chandelier above her. 6 squinted his eyes, realizing that it was none other than one of his comrades in the Stone Cold group. He realized something happened to her, and just as he was about to go towards her, he heard a faint tapping sound. "Bu-tu-tu. What the hell was that?" he muttered under his breath, looking around to see nothing but an empty street around him lit up by dim oil lamps. Unnerved by that strangely rhythmic noise that seemed to be a product of his imagination, Six ran towards the direction where Three landed. As he ran, the subtle sounds of ratata became drowned out by the sounds of his hurried footsteps. Once he ran out the corner, Six slowly peeked out of the street and saw Three buried in a crater in the middle of the stone brick road. Above her was the metal chandelier, pinning her in place. He was about to move towards her when he realized that she was not alone. There was a dark blue-scaled demi-human standing above her with a sword above his shoulders. "Dragonborn," Six muttered. "That means both of them are finished." Learning about the defeat of the two of the strongest fighters in their Stone Cold group truly put the fear inside Six's heart. Only now did he feel stupid for actively trying to call out a Dragonborn to face him. After all, if 2 and 3 couldn't even put a scratch on their scales in an ambush, then that meant that he, codenamed Six for being the weakest out of everyone, probably won't even survive a single second of meeting those demi-human monsters. Fortunately for him, Jaka didn't seem to be walking towards him at all. The dark blue Dragonborn only said the words, "Have fun hunting," before leisurely walking the other direction, whistling as he did so. Six took this chance to bolt the hell out of there. He ran through streets, dark alleyways, and backyards trying to make it back to the Hammerstone headquarters where he could at least ask for some backup. But as he ran, the hairs on his neck stood up. He quickly turned his head to the side, thinking that there was someone closely following behind him. There was nothing there but empty crates and soil buckets. "Bu-tu-tu. Rahtata." There was again, those rhythmic tapping and strumming that he kept hearing through the night. Angry, Six took out the large hammer strapped to his back and smashed the crates, exploding into 1,000 splinters. He looked back, turning around in the dark alleyway alone. "Who are you?" he shouted, his voice echoing back at him. "Show yourself." Holding the warhammer with both hands, Six swung his weapon all around him, hitting the stone brick walls around him before shouting "Iche" to scare off his stalker. He looked like he had paranoid schizophrenia. Six closed his eyes and took deep breaths before laughing at himself. He thought himself crazy for thinking such thoughts. His fear of the Dragonborns seemed to have made him a little bit on edge. He strapped the warhammer to his back, but as he looked down on the ground, he saw 2 large shadows right next to his own. 2 large beings were standing directly behind him. "HAA!" Six shouted, swinging his warhammer backwards. Yet it hit nothing but the air. There was no one around him. He looked back down on the ground and saw that the 2 large shadows he saw seemed to be nothing more than a visual illusion from the 2 street oil lamps in the street. "What the hell is happening?" he muttered under his breath. Six began running at top speeds back onto the open street before finally seeing the familiar bridge that led straight to the Hammerstone headquarters. He realized that the bridge was shrouded in mist, but he didn't care. He ran straight through it since he knew the directions instinctively. The sound of the river below him let him know that he was crossing the bridge safely. And a few moments later, the mist subsided as he stepped off the stone bridge. However, as he looked forward, he saw that same bridge again in the distance. He looked back and saw that he was right back where he started, where he ran from. What the fuck? An illusion spell? A cold sweat poured down his back. Was there a Dragonborn that they didn't account for? Six raised his warhammer, casting the spell, Imbue Snowy Mountain, which created a perfect mound of rocky ice on the 2 flat ends of his weapon. "Destruction of winter," he shouted, bringing down his warhammer towards the nearest building in front of him. The weapon broke through stone brick corners, sending rubble and powder flying everywhere. The frost then began to spread all around the unaffected area, turning everything extremely brittle. With another swing, the very front wall of the residential building began to collapse in on itself, sending snowy powder floating in the air. "Show yourself, or I'm going to destroy this whole neighborhood." Just then, a subtle voice echoed, "We're already behind you." Six quickly turned around, warhammer in hand, and saw two different orc species standing side by side in front of him. Seeing the true appearance of his stalker, Six couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe I got scared by a bunch of orcs," he said. "There are no dragonborns here in sight to help you. You should have just let me leave." The two orcs stayed silent, allowing Six to take initiative and bring his warhammer towards them. He swung his weapon overhead, creating frost that turned the very air around it brittle. As Six brought down his warhammer, the air around it exploded into icicles, which created a domino effect that eventually reached the two orcs. Needle-like icicles exploded in between the two orcs, impaling them with thousands upon thousands of holes in their meaty flesh. Six ran up towards them, dragging his warhammer in the stone road before swinging it horizontally, hitting the hairy orc on his side and sending him crashing into the spiky orc. But as the orc's body got destroyed, it turned into nothing but shadow flames that eventually dissipated in the air. It was another illusion. "Damn it! Stop with all these tricks. You're just mere orcs." Just then, Six felt a stinging pain in his stomach that override his every sense. He looked down and saw a gaping hole in his abdomen, with an orc's fist covered in flame-like shadows sticking out of it. Slowly, he felt his consciousness fade into nothingness. But then he woke up. Six looked around and found himself back in the empty street as before, with a bridge right in front of him. There was no destruction of property, there was no gaping hole in his stomach, and there were no orcs around anywhere to see. But the pain he felt was real. So real that he didn't think it was an illusion. "Bu-tu-tu. Sa-ta-ta." He looked behind and saw the same two orcs standing perfectly still, with shadows flickering around them. Six finally realized it. He was stuck in an illusion. In the real world, his true body was already knocked out cold in the alleyway, with the two shadow orcs standing over him coldly. They were just letting him experience the pain of death over and over again, not letting him leave the hellish illusion of perpetual death. From the moment he heard the rhythmic sounds of Bu-tu-tu and Ra-ta-ta, the fight was already finished. He was already caught in their spell. "I don't know what I'm still doing here," codenamed for muttered leisurely. By this point, I'm sure they'd leave no dragonborn left for me to hunt. Grieve chuckled, cackling at the youngster's arrogance. "Must be nice to be so young," Grieve said naturally. Barely out of the womb, yet confident and proud to face anything in life. Such things are quite envious. At least, I think so. "You've been talking a lot. Are you their leader or something?" For asked, rudely pointing at the hooded man in front of him. "You can say that. Well, I hope you'll at least give me a good exercise. I would hate for my trip to be wasted on bums. In terms of ranking, how do you think you would fare against those dragonborns?" Grieve raised his head and tilted it, seriously considering the question posed to him by the burly man. "The weakest out of them all, I think. They are quite talented youngsters after all." For sighed and shrugged his shoulders. "Good enough for me. I'll just finish this quickly so that I can go back faster." He reached down and raised a large, heavy sword from the ground. The very blade itself was even wider and taller than most humans, making for a very intimidating weaponry. The heavy sword was made out of the metal and Damascus steel alloy that emphasized power and weight, creating the most devastating weapon available in anyone's hands. Its heaviness prevented four from even using a normal horse and carriage, for they would break in half trying to carry his sword. Yet, thanks to his muscular physique, Four was able to wield the heavy sword as if it was as light as a feather. He tossed it in the air and caught it with one hand, showing off his strength to the intimidated red mankeys hiding behind the trees. "Show it to me," For said casually, to which Grieve did not answer. For raised the heavy sword and swung it wide, creating a heavy wind that ruffled dead leaves, branches, and the quiet forestry around them. A moment later, tens of trees fell crashing onto the ground, with the sounds of splintering woods echoing in the forest. Upon closer inspection, it was cut from the thickest parts of its base with a clean incision, which seemed to have been done by a surgical knife. For swung his heavy sword around haphazardly, like a stick, showing the ease in which he wielded the hefty weapon. Though this intimidation tactic didn't seem to have worked on the hooded figure opposite him. "I know you have it. Show it to me," For demanded. My brother Five would not have lost against that Dragonborn if you guys were not in possession of a mithril relic. That is the only way he would have been defeated. Grieve looked up at Four and raised his hand. He showed a glove with a glowing ring on its middle finger. A bluish-green aura radiated from the ring, showing its intense magical properties. Four eyed the ring with seriousness. He could feel the power from it. Good. It's good that you know to immediately wield your greatest weapon against me. It's the only way you'll survive. For took out a glowing gem of his own from his necklace. This was another mithril relic, despite it being substantially smaller and weaker than the one wielded by Grieve. He inserted this relic gem on the end of his heavy sword's hilt, imbuing it with the power of water and air mana, combining into an icy frost. If that mithril relic of yours proves better than mine, then I shall take it as my spoils after your defeat. Very well, Grieve nodded, accepting the conditions of the duel. The excited feeling knocking out from his ribbed chest told him that this was not the first time he had felt this before. It felt like he was coming back into familiar territory, like coming back home. Grieve walked forward with his hands on his robe, going weaponless. For asked incredulously, "Bold, but I respect it. I just hope you don't regret it." For used Frostbite of the Mammoth, turning his heavy sword into a curving elephant's trunk that swooped down towards Grieve. The heavy sword struck the ground with speed and force, creating an explosion of dirt and soil before a seismic earthquake shook the entire forest awake. Birds and bats flew away in fear, while critters ran away in droves. Four's smile lessened as he saw the heavy sword impaled on the ground, but without its target. Grieve stood just a few inches away with his gloved hand on the heavy sword's blade, seemingly pushing it away. Gah! Four screamed, taking back his great sword and swinging it around himself, creating momentum before using it to smash Grieve's head to the ground. But the flat blade of his sword hit nothing but the disturbed soil. Grieve was luckily a few inches further away from the sword's grasp. Annoyed, Four shouted, frozen way to the hilt, swinging his heavy sword towards Grieve. The edge of his blade created a crescent-shaped ice slash that shot towards the hooded Grieve. It was as heavy as the sword itself, yet coming at speeds almost twice as fast as his swing. This time, Four was able to see how Grieve smoothly stepped away from the slash with efficient footwork and timing. The crescent ice slash cleaved through 5 trees before crashing onto a small mound of rock in the ground and infecting it with frozen ice magic. "Show me how you fight," Four shouted, sending a flurry of crescent slashes towards Grieve. Yet, the hooded figure simply avoided the dangerous obstacles through footwork, seemingly disappearing from sight at the very last second and reappearing just as the slash shot past him. "If you're going to fight me, then I'll fight these monkeys." Four sent out a single crescent slash toward a group of red mankeys hiding behind a tree. It was coming towards them at speeds they couldn't even react to. Just as they were about to be hit, Grieve suddenly appeared in front of them and took the crescent slash head on, swinging his hand and deflecting the ice up towards the sky. "You broke the conditions of our duel," Grieve muttered, disappointed. "And for that, you will have to pay dearly." Grieve raised his hand and showed the glove containing the mithril artifact ring. Using his other hand, he twisted the golden band before slowly pulling the ring out of his finger. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Are you forfeiting our fight?" Four shouted. Grieve shook his head. "No, insolent one. I'm simply giving you what you wish for." As he took the ring out of his finger, a bluish-green aura suddenly exploded out of his very body, disintegrating the hooded cloth around him. Four felt his instincts jump, telling to back away immediately. His eyes widened as the robe began to show what was hidden underneath. He began to realize who, or what he had been fighting against this entire time. You see, this is no ordinary mithril artifact. Unlike the ones used by the Dragonborns, my ring does not give me magical powers. In fact, it limits it. As the ring left Grieve's finger, the full power of his 9-star cultivation erupted uncontrollably. The grass underneath his feet decayed in less than a second as it got exposed to his overflowing necrotic energy. Four stood there, shaking as he looked at the undead general skeleton in front of him. Fear took the strength out of his body, feeling weakness in his arms and fingers, making him drop the heavy sword into the ground. The game is over, young one. I simply hope you get a second chance in life like me. Then foresaw the whole world turning sideways. As he looked around, he saw his own body on the side, standing still, missing its head. Slowly, his consciousness faded into nothingness, never to return again. Back in the castle, the night's celebrations and merry dancing were stopped by the appearance of one young man named Christian Hammerstone. He stole everyone's attention without care. Just the fact that he arrived so late in the night meant that he didn't treat the Duke with a lot of respect. Some might call it justified since he was a descendant of the famous Hephaestus Corporation, but many would simply call it arrogance. Duke Stelmane, there is no better option than me, he said, approaching the metal automobile. Whatever the Reborn company has offered you, I'm sure that my company can give you as well. Christian noticed the unique, our symbol embedded onto the automobile's side door. Since the Duke was riding it with his wife, he assumed that this was a gift from Michael to tip the scales of favor towards his way. This metal contraption is not very efficient at all, he said boldly. You would need 4 horses to pull on a metal carriage like this. It simply shows that our Hammerstone company is a lot wiser than any other young company in this city. After all, I have my family's experience to draw back from. Siding with me is a simple recipe for success. However, the Duke didn't seem impressed, and neither were the guests around him. They knew his words were worth nothing after seeing the capabilities of the automobile. You know nothing, Chris. It's Christian, the boy corrected. You were a fine lad when you were a child, the Duke said sentimentally. Your father guided you in the right ways of building a company. What has happened to you to be so ignorant? Christian smacked his mouth rudely, turning away from the Duke and not wanting to hear another one of his sermons. Opportunity is what happened. Christian shouted, his voice in a high pitch. Right now, my brothers, sisters, cousins, and friends are all participating in the competition, and even they're completely outmatched from the real companies controlling the market. He pointed at the Duke and everyone else. This is a warning. The sharks are coming, and they smell blood in the water. It won't be long before they come swimming down the plains of the Queen's regions and come knocking on your doors. Didn't you know that Batrock Town is already under control of an Oscorp subsidiary company? I heard that they fought hard for their independence, but ended up losing it in the end. The Duke was startled, and the rest of the guests gasped as they heard the unexpected news. It was as if their whole belief was shattered in an instant, making them feel uneasy and unsteady for the future that was to come. That's so near here, one of the guests uttered silently, yet his voice was heard by all. If they're getting conquered, then what about us? This is bad for business. That was the only conclusion they could all come to. It wasn't hard to imagine what was happening in Batrock Town right now. Local businesses would immediately struggle. At best, companies would have to pay enormous amounts of tax. At worst, they would get thrown out of town for fear of them becoming too much of a threat to their reign. Meanwhile, in a time of crisis, the reigning company had the authority to turn normal citizens into soldiers to fight something they didn't want in the first place. As for the royals previously in charge of the territory, their fates were usually won with a grim ending. Even if Duke Stelmane tried to keep a still face, the anxiety he felt in his heart couldn't help but leak out into his expression. He got out of the automobile and faced Christian with a serious face. Are you sure about this? Where did you hear it? I saw it with my own eyes, Christian replied. It's one of the reasons why I'm late. I had to stop by and see why the whole town was set ablaze. The Duke paced back and forth as all sorts of thoughts flowed through his mind. Not even his wife could calm him down as he rejected her attempt at holding his hand. This is the reason why you need me, Christian pleaded. The only thing that can push off a subcompany of a global conglomerate is another subcompany from an equally strong conglomerate. Me. I'm the only one that can fight off against that Oscorp subcompany. It was evident in the Duke's eyes that he was seriously considering the boy's offer. Having the backing of the Hephaestus company would assure a safety net behind the city in the case that the Oscorp subsidiary company decided to expand further than Batrock. The looming threat of the upcoming territorial war between the conglomerate sub-companies sent an ominous mood that permeated throughout every man and woman around. Some of them were even considering to hitch their own companies to Hammerstone in the hopes that they would also get saved in the future. It was a smart move, truly, and the only one they could make in such times. But then, the Duke looked at the golden-haired boy in the middle of the castle grounds, realizing that there was another solution to this problem. Something that would not require him to relinquish his reins over to a boy. Why you? Duke Stelmane asked Christian. Why can't I ask help from the Reborn company? Christian shook his head, disappointed. Then, he gestured for his personal bodyguard to come closer to the Duke. Show the Duke the life stones, Christian ordered. Codename 1 obediently approached and took out 4 gems from his pocket, each about the size of a large bean and glowing with a white intensity similar to the moon. These rough-edged stones pulsated with a rhythmic pattern, dimming and brightening once every second. Tonight, I sent out 4 elite soldiers, each handpicked directly from the Hephaestus Training Academy, and sent them to seek out the greatest fighters of the Reborn Company, the so-called Dragonborns, Christian explained. And these life stones are directly linked to those 4 warriors. Right now, the glow of these stones indicate that they are fully awake and conscious. By now, they must have met their targets and attacked them with great skill and power. In about 3 candles worth of time, my elite soldiers will return from their duty and bring the news that they have successfully bested the Dragonborns of Reborn. The Duke looked back at Michael with worry. If those warriors were indeed picked from the Hephaestus Training Academy, then their level of skill is nothing less than world-class. But instead of panic and anxiousness, Michael showed an expression of calmness. Michael looked at One and Christian. Are you sure about that? He asked them. Just then, One felt the life stones in his palms start to shake with intensity, almost rolling out of his hands. Then, a life stones turned completely black, with no glow whatsoever. It looked like a normal quartz stone. Surprise and shock filled One's eyes, much more so Christian's. But then, it wasn't long before the second one turned dim as well. And then a few moments after that, the third one had its lights snuffed out in an instant. What the hell is happening? Christian shouted to One. Their last saving grace was the final life stone staying completely still in One's palms. But a second later, the stone exploded out into 1,000 fragments, leaving only powder residue all over his hand. What the hell does this mean? Christian asked One angrily. Stone Cold One, the strongest out of their group, knew the meaning of the light fading out of the life stones. It meant that they lost, plain and simple. However, he could not bear to disappoint the young master for the failure of his group. Meanwhile, the Duke looked at Michael and saw no surprise from him. Michael expected this. He knew this would happen. I've seen enough, Duke Stelmane announced. Your elite soldiers failed in defeating the Dragonborns, it seems. Christian looked back at the Duke, opening his mouth and failing to say anything to refute him. This was completely out of the realm of possibilities in his mind. The Stone Cold Six were elite warriors brought up by his family. They were supposed to be at the top of the line. Looks like my original decision is correct. The true path that Angora City shall take is the one with the Reborn Company right by its side. This is unfair, Christian cried out, stomping his foot on the ground like an angry child. Christian, the Duke called out softly, trying to appease the boy. Even if the Dragonborns had lost, I still would have chosen them as my sponsor. It is not a matter of strength, but principles. Your attitude tonight made me realize that if you were to become a sponsor of Angora City, you would treat my citizens and as your resources to conquer other territories. You would simply use our city to further your own goals of competing against the other companies. Christian crossed his arms angrily. But they're doing it too, he reasoned. Why can they do it while I can't? The Duke approached Christian and ruffled the boy's hair, treating him as the same child that he was years ago. That is not the way your father taught you to handle business. He was a righteous man, and you should have followed in his footsteps rather than be caught up by bad influences. Christian's eyes started to well up as his emotions bubbled under the surface. Anger, disappointment, shame. These were the emotions that an 11-year-old child cannot yet handle properly. "Get off me!" Christian shouted, swatting away the Duke's comforting hand. Then he turned to Michael and pointed right at his face. This is all your fault. If you hadn't meddled in my business, then I would have had everything I wanted." Christian looked to his bald bodyguard and uttered the key phrase, "Attack him." "Chris N.O.," the Duke screamed, but it was already too late. One took the sword out from his scabbard and rushed towards Michael. His arrival almost seemed instantaneous in the eyes of the normal guests. 1 second, he was behind Christian and the Duke, and the next, he was in front of Michael with the sword just inches away from his neck. Just then, a prismatic shield appeared and fought against the sword, clashing with its metal blade and creating sparks all around. KYA. The sudden explosion of murderous intent scared the guests witless, leaving them screaming and crying out in desperation as they tried to escape into safety. The Duke guided the guests inside his castle, where they would be safe from harm. "Damn it, where's my soldiers?" the Duke screamed in frustration. There seemed to be no one present in his castle, but shadows in the night. He took out a whistle from his pocket. Once he blew this, soldiers from all over the city would gather the castle walls to try and subdue the criminal. But just as the Duke raised the whistle to his mouth, he felt a sudden grip on his wrist. Duke Stelmane looked down and saw a visible shadow taking hold of his arm. Following it, he saw the shadow connected to a strange, hood-wearing violet blob of slime in front of him. "No need for that," Fudge said casually to the Duke. "Let my master have his fun." The Duke eyed Fudge with confusion. That guy's at the peak of the 5-star cultivation. His concern was valid. Who wouldn't worry after seeing an 11-year-old boy get attacked by a superhuman soldier trained to kill his targets in the most efficient of ways? Yet, Fudge assured the Duke, "Just watch my master. He learned something good recently, and he wants to try it out." Duke Stelmane could only watch with concerned eyes as Michael faced off against the stone-cold one. One exerted extreme force to his sword as he tried to penetrate through the protective shield around Michael. However, the absolute unity defense around Michael counteracted the fire and earth mana inside the metal itself to push it further away. If one wanted to push even further, he would have to risk his sword getting turned into metal slag. TSK. That strange defense again, he muttered under his breath. As one struggled, Michael took this time to observe the opponent right in front of him, sensing the mana contained around his body. There's lots of water and air mana in his cores, which means he's powerful in the ice spells. He's wearing a variant of the icy blue armor that 5 wore in the arena, with this one having iceberg-like shoulder guards that didn't impede his sword movements. This equipment is made with magic power in mind, not purely physical power. He looks like the strongest 5-star fighter I've ever faced, at least before myself, he concluded. And a moment later, he was proven right. One retracted his sword and chanted, "Hephaestus chilled flames," before using his finger to brush the blade from the base to its tip, with his touch leaving a blue fire that seemed to emanate a cold mist. The absence of fire mana in those flames fascinated Michael. It was made out of pure water and air mana, imitating the structure of fire to achieve actual flames. "Frozen Dragon, one strike," he shouted, swinging his sword in graceful stances that left a trail of icy blue flames in the air. Michael felt as if he was watching a Chinese cultivation donghua. As one slashed the air, a pattern emerged from the trailing flames. A long and thin stretch of body moved across the air, like a snake slithering in its lair. Yet, this snake had icy blue fiery scales and clawed legs near its tail and shoulders. Soon, a head formed at the very top, with a long protruding mouth filled with sharp teeth and 2 long shrimp antennae near its nose. Its jaws unclenched, roaring directly at Michael. This was a dragon, but not the one that looked similar to Western fantasy, but one closer to the depiction of Chinese mythology. Michael was so entranced at the appearance of the blue-flamed dragon that he almost welcomed its descent towards him. At the very last second, he used flight and shot up tens of meters up in the air, dodging the dragon's lunge. As the dragon hit the ground, the stone brick flooring exploded into rubble and icy flames, turning the castle grounds into an almost hellish landscape. Stones burning with blue flames fell from the skies and hit the ground, spreading a deadly frost that turned everything into an icicle. Michael looked down from the skies, amazed at the power of the dragon. Magic theory acquired. ChatGK4's voice echoed in his head. Just then, as the mist from the explosion subsided down, he saw the reformed dragon rush towards the sky. One rode in its head, with his sword pointed directly at Michael. One sword was imbued with the power of a mithril relic the size of a fist. It emanated an icy blue power that seemed to feed into the dragon below him. "Icy dragon's breath," one screamed, thrusting his sword and commanding the dragon to release a giant ball of blue flames the size of an elephant. Michael floated above, with air mana propelling his feet and hands upwards. His mind began analyzing the mana composition of the icy ball of fire, watching as the wisps of water and air mana come out of one's sword to empower the ball of the blue ball of flames. It only took a few milliseconds before ChatGK4 gave him an answer in his mind. A flow of information washed over his brain, giving him the necessary magic theory to cast an entirely new 5-star mystical art spell specifically designed to counteract the icy dragon's breath. "Let's call this the Icy Dragon Breath Mint," Michael thought to himself as an equally large ball of magma manifested in front of him. This magma flowed upon itself like a newborn planet, spewing out chunks of lava as the layers subducted under itself. As the icy ball of fire hit the magma planet, everything exploded into a flurry of white lights sparkling in the air, caused by the complete annihilation of the mana particles contained in the two spheres. "What?" one shouted in shock, pulling his reins on the dragon and stopping midair. Those that tried to destroy his icy ball of flames using water magic or any kind of spell will be faced by an uncontrollable explosion of steam that he would have taken advantage of. Yet, somehow his icy dragon breath was completely neutralized in a mere second. Down below in the castle grounds, Tracheus looked up at the night sky with his eyes showing complete disbelief. "A perfect counterspell," he muttered under his breath. He didn't expect to see such a high-level execution of a counterspell tonight. Even he couldn't do it reliably. Creating a magic spell to perfectly cancel another spell was a technique that required absolute precision, boundless creativity, and perfect mastery over mana to execute. If one knew how easy Michael made it look, he would have realized that he was completely outclassed. Michael was just toying with him, but one kept fighting. He took the flaming blue dragon's antennae and whipped it, causing the creature to rush towards Michael. The dragon's body slithered up and down in the air, its jaws wide open as it preyed upon Michael in a circle. Once one was positioned out of Michael's line of sight, the dragon swooped in and used its sharp, flaming claws to tear Michael into pieces. The flaming claws reached the invisible prismatic shield, sending white sparks all over the place as the icy blue flames tried to fight the Unity defense. It didn't work. A repelling force pushed the dragon backwards, causing it to be submerged in a large collection of clouds, obscuring it from view. Then silence. A few seconds later, the sky rumbled as an icy cone pierced through the gray mist and revealed a snow-tipped mountain crashing towards Michael like a meteor. "Mountain pass!" one screamed, coming behind the mountain and riding his dragon. Michael felt as if Mount Everest itself was raining down on him. Its grandness covered the moonlight, casting a shadow over his entire being. The mountain fell through the air before crashing directly towards the castle walls, disintegrating the stone brick walls that it collided into. Chunks of the rocky mountain flew everywhere before dissipating into a mist of pure mana. The destruction in the wall led the nearby stone bricks to fall forwards, crashing into the moat below and creating a splashing sound as it did so. Up above, one looked down at the rubble, hoping to see Michael's body among it. Unfortunately for him, Michael was nowhere to be found. Just then, he saw a shadow flashed above him. He looked up and saw Michael standing in the air with his arms crossed, completely unscathed from the literal mountain that he threw at him. The stone-cold warrior gripped his sword tighter, feeling the heat of the fight finally come to him. He couldn't find a way to break through Michael's defenses. It was like he was invulnerable. "I'll find a way to defeat you," one swore. Michael shrugged. "You can't, but you're welcome to try." Suddenly, Michael's arms lit up in a strangely familiar blue flame. One was dazed as he felt the cold breeze emanating from Michael. "No," one muttered. It can't be." His fears came true as Michael imitated his sword stances using nothing but his arms. The icy blue flames in Michael's hands left a frosty residue in the air that slowly formed into a slender body with flaming scales and extended snout. "That's impossible," one screamed as he stared at the creature in front of him. Michael created an icy dragon of his own. He copied the unique physical art spell passed down only through enrolling in the Hephaestus Training Academy. Michael jumped on top of the dragon's head, standing directly above its skull. With a single gesture from him, the dragon soared in the air, meeting eye to eye with one's dragon. The two looked completely identical, down to the flaming scales and sharp clawed legs. It was a jaw-dropping moment for one. He stared at the dragon in front of him, wondering what kind of illusion Michael had cast. Yet, soon, he would be completely proven wrong. "Fire," Michael muttered. His dragon opened its jaws wide, with mana gathering at the tip of its canine teeth. Water vapors flowed out of the mouth, turning into mist as it traveled in the air. The combination of water and air mana created a giant ball of icy flames even bigger than an elephant. It was one's signature move, the icy dragon's breath. And as it shot towards him, the more he was sure of it. He raised his sword, using his stances to create a defensive wall of ice. However, his unsteady mental state forced a mistake in his sword's positioning, causing the ice to suddenly melt into a gaseous vapor. The ball of icy fire crashed into one's dragon, causing it to reel back in pain, uncontrollably shimmering in and out of the air. The collision sent one flying backwards. He tried to hold onto the dragon's antenna, but failed to get a proper grip. He fell from the skies, struggling to get a grasp onto his injured flaming dragon. As he plummeted down, he extended his hand to the dragon, telepathically commanding it to swoop in and save him. The dragon slowly regained its solid form after Michael's attack. It looked down at one, seeing its creator just a few seconds away from crashing into the ground. Yet the dragon shook its head. One felt his connection over the dragon cut off, losing all the mana attached to it from his cores. Coldness spread through his body, but not because of ice, but because of the absence of something, the absence of mana. He crashed into the castle grounds, creating a large crater with stone brick roads. He groaned, feeling multiple broken bones inside his body. But he couldn't care about that. He looked up and saw his ice dragon looking down coldly at him. At its side was Michael and his dragon. The two dragons soared through the air in unison, completely under Michael's will. Cold blood rushed through his head as he realized that Michael took control of his own magic spell. Silence filled the night, except for the crackling of fire above. The two ice flame dragons hovered in the air, looking down at the castle grounds below. It was an incomprehensible sight for mortals and mages alike. Even those not adept in the complexities of the mystic arts knew that a spell was something intricately connected to its caster. It was an extension of themselves like another limb. Yet now, they saw Michael wrench control of the dragon right under one's nose. It followed Michael's order as if the dragon had no connection to its original caster in the first place. No one knew how absurd this was more than Tracheus, the 7-star Tower Master. Seber's words came crawling back to Tracheus. All those hyperbolic descriptions of Michael's talents in the mystic arts didn't seem so excessive now, given what he just witnessed. In fact, genius wouldn't even begin to describe the mastery it would take to do something that Michael did so easily. How is this possible? One muttered, with blood spilling out of his mouth. With the two dragons under his feet, Michael floated down. "You weren't using your mana correctly," he said to one. "I can, so I took it." His supreme skill gave him complete mastery over mana, not just his own, but also everything around him. Taking ownership of a magic spell was as easy as breathing for him. 1. Feeling the despair of loss overcoming his body, gritted his teeth. His desperation fueled him to grab his sword from its hilt and smashed its bottom onto a jagged rock, displacing the mithril relic, tumbling a couple of times before landing just a few inches away from his head. With shaking hands, one took the icy blue mithril relic and forced it into his mouth, swallowing it whole. "What are you doing?" Tracheus shouted at him. What he did was nothing less than suicidal. But for one, losing was already equivalent to death. Fighting Michael made him feel like he was facing against an insurmountable wall, something that he could not overcome through all his powers. Replicating magic spells he only saw once. Taking control of someone else's magic spells, Michael's talents in the mystical arts were nothing less than a cheat and an unfair power. So, the only way one was going to defeat him was to take extraordinary measures. "Grahhh," he screamed as the mithril relic began to wreck his entire body. The amount of power contained in that gem was not meant to be consumed by a human, for it would destroy them completely from the inside out. His skin began to tear, revealing a glowing blue light from the inside, evidence of the mithril relic releasing all its power in his innards. The pain he was going through was indescribable, worse than death. Yet for a brief moment, he felt unprecedented power running through his veins. 2 new points of light spawned inside his abdomen, letting his cultivation shoot through from a 5-star power-up to the 7-star realm. "Ha ha ha ha," he laughed with a coarse voice, seemingly echoing in the night. Michael looked at one's body and saw the mana in his cores going haywire. It was fighting the influx of power coming from the mithril relic, trying to subdue it for its own. However, it was too powerful, eventually creating cracks inside his mana cores. However, one didn't seem to mind this at all. He floated into a standing position and faced the night sky. "Power! I have unlimited power!" he screamed, spreading his hands wide. A beam of frost shot out of the cracks in his hands, hitting the walls and the towering spire of the main castle. The tremendous force turned a large part of the castle roof into an ice sculpture before exploding out into a million ice particles and revealing the interior below. Some unfortunate guests inside the castle fell victim to the destruction, getting buried under the falling ice debris. Michael knew that one couldn't control his power. If he were left alone any more than this, he could end up destroying the whole castle and harming everyone inside. He had to stop this. "Let go of the power, or this won't end well for you," Michael warned him. One looked at Michael with his pure blue light eyes and tilted his cracking head. "You? Look at me. I have unlimited power. You cannot control me." Michael raised his right fist and said, "If you move even a single twitch, I will fire." He had his thumb unfolded and his pointy finger aimed directly at Stone Cold One. He had created a simple finger gun, which didn't seem to be threatening enough for the maddened one. "And what are you going to do with that?" he scoffed. He was at the peak of 7-star cultivation. He was almost twice as fast as before. And with the power supplied to him by the mithril artifact, even those 2 dragons would have to cower under his feet. And despite the power ruining his body, one knew that Michael's mystical art spells still fell victim to its inherent weakness. It was slow. Compared to physical art spells, mystical spells were slow to fire and reach their target, meaning one would be able to dash out of the way before Michael cast his spell. With a smile, one's muscle twitched as he used an upscale version of the ice speed footwork spell to disappear from Michael's sight, frost building on his feet. But as soon as he did, a bright flash of light blinded his eyes. A moment later, his vision came back and everything looked normal. Yet when he looked down, he saw a tiny hole within his robe, something not even noticeable at all. But a second later, blood spread around the fabric, revealing that he had a small circular wound in his chest that pierced straight through the back. "What?" he uttered, confused. He looked up at Michael and saw wisps of smoke coming off his pointy finger. As the blood spilled out of his wound, one slowly lost consciousness and transferred over to the void of death. Unfortunately, His control over the last dredges of resistance in his body was the only thing preventing the rampage of the mithril relic. One fell to the ground face first, with the cracks in his body beginning to widen and with bright blue light leaking out with much greater intensity than before. The ground shook as the power of untamed mana began to wreak havoc in the surroundings. Seeing the mana in one's body start to collapse and annihilate each other, Michael knew that this was a bomb about to detonate. It wouldn't be long before the mithril relic would explode, taking the entire castle with it. Michael raised his hands and commanded the two ice flame dragons by his side to swoop down and take one's body up in the air. The dragons used their claws, dragging one's corpse up in the night sky. They soared higher than they ever did before, higher up above the clouds. As they reached the starry skies, one's body stopped trembling. Then, boom, it exploded into a flurry of ice crystals spreading wide over the skyline of Angora City. The explosion propagated a cool breeze in the air, creating snow and hail falling from the skies and bringing the winter season earlier than expected. Michael looked up and let a snowflake fall to his palms. He thought back to the killing blow he inflicted upon one. That was power of his secret trump card, Unity Gun. This was the idea that formed in his mind after upgrading ChatJK for software. The complexity of the magic spell was so hard that it took his personal AI assistant 12 hours to finish its synthesis. After all, this spell was a combination of physical and mystical arts. Using the knowledge of how mana flow worked in physical art spells, ChatJK-4 changed the course of his veins to imitate the inner workings of a modern gun. With his pointy finger as the barrel, his thumb as the iron sight, and his Unity mana as the bullet, Michael created a miniature explosion at the back of his knuckles to propel the Unity bullet out of his body. Then, using the knowledge of all the mystical art spells in his arsenal, Michael created a small focus point to condense the bullet into a small laser that reached its target almost instantaneously. The results turned out even better than he expected. He felt like he held the power of the Godforge in his hands, having the capabilities to burn through anything it touched. With just his pointy finger, Michael perhaps created the most devastating attack anyone could have ever thought of. The rest of the guests peeked out of the castle gates, still wary of what had happened just a few seconds earlier. However, they saw no sign of the maniac one. Instead, they only saw the golden-haired boy standing above in the air, floating alone as snow and hail fell slowly from the skies. They saw what happened. They witnessed Michael defeat one with his own magic spells. Their perception of the Reborn company would forever change because of this. They thought their leader was someone born into power as an heir. But as it turned out, Michael's power was the real deal. The Duke looked up at Michael, his eyes glistening with complexity. He walked over to the Tower Master and uttered, "I underestimated his talent in magic. I never thought he was capable of doing any of this." Tracheus shook his head. "This is beyond the realm of genius," he replied. "What Michael did today was something that cannot be replicated even by me or any other mystic master in the world. He is blessed by mana unlike anyone in history." Michael's last move was what truly surprised the great Tower Master. The finger point. From his perspective, a single beam of light emanated from Michael's pointy finger and instantaneously reached one's body. There was no magic circle, no magic theory, no mana signatures, nothing. It was as if pure magic and power itself had pierced through his body. Even he, in the hundreds of years of knowledge stored in his brain from studying in the Magic Tower, failed to decipher anything about the light from the finger. It was indescribable, but it seemed there was one person who didn't appreciate Michael's overwhelming show of force. Christian Hammerstone fell on his knees, slamming his fist on the ground. "No," he screamed in denial. "This can't be happening." He pointed at the Duke, his eyes reddened. "Why can't you let my company have your city? You were my godfather. Instead, you're going to let an unranked company become the sponsor. How unfair is that?" The Duke shook his head, completely disappointed in what had occurred in his very own castle. He couldn't help but laugh at Christian's insolence. This kid knew nothing at all. "Even now, you know nothing at all. I'll show you the truth." He walked over to a large chest near the drawbridge and opened it up, revealing a huge stack of papers inside. He picked up everything his hands could carry and threw it in the air, letting the papers fly through the cold breeze. The papers scattered, reaching high up in the air before falling back down to the castle grounds. The guests picked the papers on the ground, and as they glazed over its contents, their eyes began to widen with shock and surprise. Meanwhile, Christian saw one paper float directly towards him. He realized that it was a newspaper article dated today. He didn't even have to pick it up to reach the large, bold text at the top of the page. Reborn Company debuts at the 450th spot in the Golden 500. Christian's eyes widened, picking up the paper with angry, trembling hands. He began to read the contents of the article, reading about the introduction of the Reborn Company to the Queen's region, how they renovated Orcus Town into something completely unrecognizable, and how they were rebuilding the original Golden Road. Tears dropped onto the paper, staining the ink. Becoming part of the Golden 500 just a month after its debut was unprecedented and was not even something that direct heirs like Christian could hope to do. And the Reborn didn't just graze the very last rankings. They breezed past them and reached the 450th spot. Christian ripped the paper in half and, in his anger, threw a large vase towards Michael. The pot wasn't even going to reach Michael, but suddenly, an arrow pierced through the vase, shattering the clay and splashing the pot water in the ground. Michael looked above the castle walls and saw the silhouette of a figure in front of the moon, holding a bow and arrow. It was Shiina. She had been positioned here this entire time, watching and waiting. "Sorry for interrupting, Lord Michael, but I couldn't let that vase stain your dashing white clothes." "Sorry you didn't get to fight," Michael said to her, with his voice transmitting to the shadow underneath her feet. "It would ease my mind if you had let me take care of that pesky one, but it was an honor for me to watch you put on a master class," she replied, bowing to Michael from afar. Meanwhile, the Duke walked over to Christian and slapped him across the face, stopping his childish tantrum. The boy cried even harder, but he needed this after what he had done tonight. "Your father will hear about this," the Duke said. "He will be very disappointed." Soldiers walked over the Christian and put him in chains. He would be in the Duke's custody before he got transferred over to the Hephaestus estate. "Sorry for spoiling the surprise," the Duke said, approaching Michael. "The newspaper company sent advance copies to me as a courtesy. After all, it wasn't every day that a company breaks through the Golden 500, and an unknown one at that." Michael picked up one of the papers and read through it. It detailed how the Reborn Company got its fame and fortune through selling chocolate products, armors, weapons, and even strange metal carriages. It didn't talk about the king's region or the nation of Reborn in the parched lands. Michael guessed that this was because those facts were hard to verify for the newspaper company in such a short time. "What will happen to him?" Michael asked as he watched the weeping boy get dragged inside the castle. Knowing his father, Christian will be stripped of all his inheritances, including the Hammerstone Company. He will never be able to abuse his power and influence again. Duke Stelmane sighed as he looked at the aftermath of the fight. His castle roof was destroyed, with pieces of glass and rubble strewn all around the courtyard. The walls had a gaping hole in the middle, allowing rudely awakened people from the city to peek at what happened in the castle. "This is what happens when a boy is given too much power for his own good," Duke muttered under his breath. Unfortunately, these kinds of things happen quite often in the Queen's region. Inheritors and heirs of large companies tend to be managed by the founder's children and family members unprepared for such a large responsibility. There were only very few exemptions where successions became a good ending. It seems the golden-haired boy in front of him was one such example. Even though Michael was from the Vanderbilt family, owner of arguably the richest business in the whole world, he seemed to keep a good head over his shoulders and created something as amazing as the Reborn Company. The Duke even heard that Michael wasn't given any special attention by Eyes Vanderbilt. It was clear, too, since the Reborn Company wasn't influenced by the Vanderbilt way of business. It remained Michael's accomplishment and his alone. Not even his tremendous magical talent could be attributed to the Vanderbilt family. They were not known for their mystical or physical aptitude, only for their business acumen. Yet Michael showed a feat not even a tower master could replicate. It was truly a God-given talent all on his own. Michael's presence was like a bright sun in the darkest of nights. Everyone could see it. All the other guests approached Michael and congratulated him on his victory. Currying favor with a ranked 450 company was the best thing they could have ever thought to do. Of course, the Duke didn't waste any time and approached Michael. I will announce it here in front of everyone. Angora City requests the Reborn company to become its sponsor. No one was surprised by this. They would have treated the Duke as a simpleton if he didn't ask it after they saw what Michael and his company could do. Even some of the companies who treated Reborn as their rivals couldn't help but accept the fact that they were on a completely different level of their own. Wait a minute, Eunice said, interrupting. Sponsoring Angora City will certainly help you and everyone else. But what about the Reborn company? We will be tasked with the burden of supporting the entire capital city. What compels us to agree to your proposition? Una looked back at Michael and winked at him. He smiled, letting her do her thing. This was exactly why she was here in the first place. As a diplomat, she knew exactly how to negotiate a much better deal for Michael and the Reborn company. She knew how to put the right amount of pressure into the Duke so that he would have to relent on benefits that could truly help Reborn. The Duke smiled and nodded in understanding. Very well, he said. I am willing to lower the income tax of Reborn to 10%. The rest of the guests gasped, almost salivating at that offer. Their companies had to pay 25% in order to operate in Angora City. But Una remained steadfast. She stared at the Duke without blinking. Are you sure that's your offer? It was already quite a generous offer, but the Una wanted more. As the Duke remembered the fact that the Dragonborns defeated the Stone Cold Six, that they had automobiles in their possession, that they could produce the only mithril artifacts in the world, and most of all, they had Michael Vanderbilt leading them on. The choice was simple. No taxes for the Reborn company, he declared. Everyone went into an uproar. They couldn't believe it. But for the Duke, it was the only way to build a good relationship with the Reborn company. He wasn't thinking about today, tomorrow, or even a year after. He was thinking about 10 years after or 100 years after. The potential of Michael and the Reborn company was limitless. Duke Stelmane wholeheartedly believed that they would reach global heights in less than 100 years. His intuition told him so. And if he built a relationship with them this early on, then, as the Reborn company soared into the skies, Angora City will be pulled up with it. He was the only one who could see that as impressive as that 450th ranking in the Golden 500 sounded, it was still a gross underestimation of the Reborn company. The article only took into account their business in Angora and Neo-Orcus City, completely disregarding the entirety of the King's region. This meant that their true rankings were well above that. Una looked back at Michael and nodded with a smile. This was the best deal they were going to get. Michael approached the Duke and held out his hand, and the two shook hands, symbolizing their agreement. As the night wore on, the guests slowly departed from the castle back to their headquarters in the city. But of course, that was not before they approached Michael and made some sort of agreement for cooperation. Shiana got down from the castle walls and helped Michael deal with all the gritty details. She began to take orders of automobiles, liquid concrete, armors and weapons, and even batches of chocolate bars. Of course, they were willing to pay a good amount to have it delivered as fast as possible. The guests argued against each other as to who would get to order first, to which Shiana had to assure them that everyone would get their products regardless of who ordered first. Meanwhile, Michael and Una were at the Duke's castle ironing out all the details of their cooperation. Since the Reborn company would sponsor Angora City, this meant that Michael would have to help in improving the city itself by increasing it up to the famous Reborn standard, such as creating a plumbing system for every building, an electrical infrastructure, and a railroad system. The Duke felt his head spin once Michael explained how electricity worked. To make him understand better, they planned for the Duke and his wife to travel to the nation of Reborn and see everything for himself. They also talked about the Golden Road, which would directly cross Angora City and act as a node for all the other branches to connect towards. For example, the road would branch out to the east and west to reach the other territories near Angora City. Now, I'm sure that you've heard about Batrock Town. The Duke muttered seriously, with the oil lamps flickering in the wind. It's been conquered, right? Duke Stelmay nodded. I have just received word. It's official. An Oscorp subsidiary has taken control of the reins. Do you know who the Oscorp Corporation is? Michael shook his head, only hearing about the name in passing conversation. The Oscorp Corporation is the second largest business in the entire world, second only to your Vanderbilt family. You can even say that they are rivals through and through. They have stayed in I's shadow for too long, and now it seems that they want to take I's title away for themselves. Duke Stelmane explained to Michael about the 5 conglomerates controlling the current global market. At the very top spot of the Golden 500 was the Vanderbilt business, headed by none other than the great Lionize Vanderbilt. Coming in under him was the Oscorp Consortium. They were just like the Vanderbilt business, which was mostly controlled by a single family and a patriarch at the top. Those 2 conglomerates had their hands in every business imaginable. As long as they could make money on it, those 2 conglomerates were part of it. The third spot was the Hephaestus Group, known for their monopoly on the world's greatest weapons and armors. They owned the biggest mine in the world located in another continent, allowing them to become the world's best supplier for anything metallurgical. The Hammerstone Company is part of the Hephaestus Group, right? Michael asked. Yes, Duke Stelmane nodded. Hammerstone is just one of the families that are part of the Hephaestus conglomerate, but still considered to be an indirect descendant of it. If you noticed, the ones that the Stone Cold Six used are one of the top armor sets available in the current market. Michael did remark that the icy blue equipment they used was better than normal, but he still considered it as far below the level of what the dwarves could make. He now found it quite a waste that the Dwarven Kingdom hid themselves for so long in the royal continent. If they had allowed businesses to be conducted in their territory, then they might have been the one in the top 3 spot instead of the Hephaestus Group. The conglomerate on the 4th spot is the Goldstone Trust. They make their money through managing lands and territories all over the globe. And if you look at all the unclaimed territories in the Queen's region, more often than not, they are property of the Goldstone Trust. In other words, their business was in real estate. Michael was quite lucky that he obtained the massive landmass of the Parched Lands as a gift. That was probably because the perceived value of a desolate desert was very low, which was why it hadn't been conquered yet. And at the 5th spot is Sinclair's Elixirs. Their whole business is derived from their unique blends of salves, healing potions, and even cultivation pills. They have hospitals and apothecaries located almost everywhere around the world because of their usefulness to society. I don't know if you noticed, but they have a branch located somewhere in the heart of our city. Also, the biggest reason as to why Sinclair's Elixirs stood tall as a conglomerate is due to none other than Sinclair. That old, which is still the best healer in the entire world, with some even saying that she could cure death itself. This has led the other conglomerates to seek her services whenever they got a disease. I heard that your grandfather once had to pay an entire country to her as compensation for when she cured his cold. Michael did notice an apothecary in the city, but didn't take notice of it much. By the looks of it, they still use the old health practices such as bloodletting, acupuncture, and herbal medicine. It made him wonder whether the modern knowledge of medicine still worked in this magical world. So those 5 conglomerates are at the top of the Golden 500. But they are not the ones competing in this Golden Road competition. Michael asked. They are not. It's their sub-companies, the companies managed by heirs and successors, that are competing. The one in particular that I want to talk about is the Flare Corp company that took control of Batrock Town. They're a sub-company of the Oscorp Consortium, Michael remembered. This Flare Corp company is an up-and-coming business owned by a direct child of the Oscorp patriarch. He is quite young and hungry to prove himself, which was probably why he took this opportunity to expand his territory in the Queen's region. Michael looked at the Duke's expression and saw a hint of worry in his eyebrows. You think he's going to expand to Angora City? Duke Stelmane went silent for a second before nodding his head. In all likelihood, I think yes. It's the only logical way for him to compete against his older brothers and sisters who have much more established companies. Michael looked at the Duke and posed him a question. Who do you think would win between us? He asked. I'm sure you can expect their greatest warriors to be at least as strong as one, he estimated. Are you worried? The Duke took a peek at Michael's expression and saw a peculiar expression. It was as if he was saying the words, not bad or decent, in his mind. He thought Michael would be apprehensive of FlareCorp, but that look on his face was nothing less than indifference. And as it turned out, the Duke's guesses weren't that far off from the truth. Okay, that's not bad, Michael thought. I just can't say those words out loud to the Dragonborns. They'll get lazy and stop training. In his eyes, the Dragonborns were far superior to the very best of what the Stone Cold Six could offer. If he took into account that the Dragonborns weren't yet using their full power when defeating the Stone Cold Six, then Michael was even more sure of that estimation. But it's good to be a little bit more careful, he said to himself. I'll have to give more mithril artifacts to the Shadow Orcs. If the Duke was hearing his thoughts right now, he would have his jaw on the floor. After knowing what he was up against, Michael finished his discussion with the Duke, and the two of them signed a contract of sponsorship. With Yuna as the witness and the power vested in the name Montgomery, she was able to make the contract into an official legal binding document. Thank you again for your help, Michael. Sorry you had to fight your way through it. Michael shrugged. It's fine. I expected a little bit of action anyway. Those Hammerstone guys have been making shady moves ever since we arrived in the city. Duke Stelmane felt sorry and bowed his head to Michael. Expect good news tomorrow. The transfer of ownership will have been processed, he said. What do you mean? The Hammerstone Company branch. It's yours for the taking. All their assets, treasury, inventory, and even real estate will now be transferred to the Reborn Company. Michael raised his eyebrows. Why do I have it? With Christian stripped of all of his inheritance, the Hammerstone branch here in Angora City will be completely abandoned. This was a very welcome surprise. Isn't the Hammerstone Company part of the Hephaestus group? Are you sure they would want that? Oh, I'm sure, Duke Stelmane chuckled. The Hephaestus conglomerate cannot take what is not rightfully theirs, and neither can Chrysidon's father. If they do, then they would have to accept the Christians' crime of attempted murder. They don't want that. And since the Hammerstone Company is small compared to what they have, it is much more logical for them to cut off their losses. And besides, Christian's father is a righteous man. He will want to give you this as compensation for all the trouble his son caused you. After finishing the conversation with the Duke, Michael and Yuna returned to the Reborn headquarters. He convened with the Dragonborns and everyone else inside his room, who had lots of things to tell him. There, he learned everything that happened with their fights, including all the damage that they inflicted upon the buildings of Angora City. Ho-ho, tonight was quite eventful. Grieve laughed. I don't remember the last time I had this much fun. Oh wait, I don't remember anything ho-ho-ho. Hugh, Amisu cried, regretting her excessive actions that resulted in the destruction of the public library. Those poor books. What? You gotta destroy a library. Aw. I shouldn't have overslept, Zion said, stomping his feet. I'm going to bed. Shiana, you're going to take care of all the reconstructions, right? Jaco sluggishly dragged his feet back to his bedroom. Even though Shiana tried to drag him back, he seemed to be too fast for someone that was sleepy. Huh, you scale meanies are still inferior to my Shadow Orcs. Fudge bragged, jumping from one Dragonborn's head to the other. They didn't even need to destroy public property to defeat them. And you still call yourselves the best fighters. Zion chased Fudge, with their ruckus creating chaos and noise all over the dorm rooms. You guys are going to sleep now, right? Shiana asked with a smile, yet her eyes glinted with a strange red light. This seemed to have done the trick and subdued the two troublemakers. Lord Michael, shall I send Rebornians to fix all the destruction in the city? Please do, he replied. Make sure to give them a few gifts as compensation, too. A few hundred gold should suffice. It was important for him to have the citizens look at the Reborn Company in a positive light, so that they would keep on buying from them. Very well, Shiana replied. I shall work on it tonight. The white-scaled Dragonborn left the room with a pep in her step. Even if he insisted that she worked on it tomorrow, she would still do it regardless of what he said. The next day, everyone in Angora City was awoken by the sounds of incessant shouting in the streets. Extra, extra! Get your newspapers here for only 10 bronze coins. a teenage boy screamed, using a rolled-up newspaper to project his voice louder. "Shut up," one of the citizens above the balcony shouted back. "I don't want to read the news today." "You want to read it, sir?" "I assure you," the boy shouted back. Eventually, the man walked down to the street and purchased a newspaper for himself. And immediately, the headline shocked him to the core and got rid of any sleepiness left behind in his body. He began reading the article fervently. He didn't even mind that he was in his boxers while he was out in the streets. He just had to read the news. Practically everyone who held a newspaper in their hands, either they be workers riding in a carriage, barbers cutting hair, or just mothers cradling babies, they all had their eyes stuck in the words plastered in the newspaper. Reborn Company, sponsor of Angora City. It was in this article that everyone learned about the agreement struck between Michael and the Duke just hours before midnight. Many would have protested this fact, but the next page of the newspaper detailed the fact that the Reborn Company achieved the 450th ranking on its debut in the Golden 500. This prompted people to fill the streets of the Reborn Company. They wanted to see the 450th ranked company in the entire world for themselves. "Coachman, please drop me off at the Reborn department store," a young man said excitedly to the carriage driver. However, the coachman refused. "I can't. The whole street is blocked off." The entire avenue was jam-packed by people clamoring to enter their headquarters. The stories told in the newspaper article about free-flowing water, air conditioners, and railways piqued the curiosity of everyone. They wanted to know if it was real. The Rebornians had to keep the people at bay, or else things could turn into a stampede. "I'm sorry, Lord Michael. We weren't expecting this much of a reaction," Shiana said, looking down the window. "It's fine. Just give the people what they want. We have new products coming from a nation of Reborn, right? It's time we open the upper floors to the public." The reason Michael called it a department store in the first place was because he had already planned it to be filled with a variety of products ranging from vegetable products to hammers and nails. The only reason why he hadn't done that in the first place was because they still didn't have any permission to continue to the Golden Road, so the replenishment of products would have been hard. But now that they had an agreement with the city, the construction of the Golden Road could continue on its way. He could finally bring the products back in the King's region to Angora City and vice versa. "Very well, Lord Michael. I'll have our people prepare the 2nd to 5th floor of the department store," Shiana said. As the Rebornians were busy accommodating the massive influx of people coming into the store, Michael took this time and descended into the shadows, teleporting out of their headquarters. A second later, he arrived in a very different part of the city. In front of him was a building in a dwarven, forge-inspired architecture with a massive title on the front that said Hammerstone Company. Even though it was already late in the day, Michael saw no people entering or leaving the doors. In fact, it seemed that it was barred shut through metal chains. He learned yesterday that he was now the proud owner of the Hammerstone branch and all its assets, meaning he now owned the building in front of him. After sending out his shadow into the gaps under the door, Michael was able to teleport inside, where he was met with the surprised faces of the previous Hammerstone employees. "I'm sorry, sir, but our company is closed." Butch, the leader of Hammerstone's adventuring party, recognized Michael. "Sir Michael, you must be here to seize all of our assets," he said solemnly. "We were just about to pack up our things and go." All around him were employees who had depressed looks on their faces as they packed up things on crates. "What are you all doing?" Michael asked them. "Well, since you own the branch now, it means we have nowhere else to go. We're leaving town," Butch answered for everyone else. Michael looked around and saw about hundreds of people all around the building. There were probably 1,000 more employees who now found themselves unemployed and without work. "Why don't you just work for me?" Michael asked them. Butch and everyone else stopped what they were doing. They seemed surprised that Michael even offered them this option. "But we tried to ambush you," Butch said. "That was the Stone Cold guys. As far as I'm concerned, they have been punished. Meanwhile, you and everyone else here are still talented people. I don't see why I should get rid of you." Usually, a company handoff like this would be a complete makeover. It was more logical for Michael to strip the Hammerstone Company for scraps and simply build his own establishment instead. As for the previous employees, Usually they would be cast out simply because they weren't needed anymore. After all, their skill sets may be completely different from what the new company may need. There were cases when a few employees would be retained because of their talent, but about 90% of the employees would be fired. However, Michael seemed to think differently. "I will hire every single one of you to work for my Reborn company," he said, with his voice booming and echoing to every corner of the Hammerstone building. Butch looked at his comrades, his co-workers, his family. They seemed touched with Michael's offer, with tears welling up in their eyes. They thought they would have to leave Angora City itself to find another job. "We'll do anything," one of the employees wearing smithing attire said. "We'll work the minimum wage if we have to. Please just let us work in Angora City." The rest of them begged too, offering themselves at low wages just for a chance that Michael would stay true to his word. But for Michael, that wasn't enough. "No," he said to them. "If you're going to be part of the Reborn company, then that means that your quality of life will be up to our standards as well." Michael began listing off all the benefits of becoming a Rebornian, including incredible salaries, fair time management, and other such amenities that the nation of Reborn could offer. Everyone's eyes widened as they heard Michael's offer to them. It was really good. Too good, in fact, that it made them think that it was too good to be true. But Michael was serious. As soon as they accepted his offer to become a Rebornian, they would sign an ironclad contract that would give them all the benefits that Michael promised them. "What do you think?" Michael asked them. "Do you want to become a Rebornian?" In a small house in the outskirts of Angora City, a mother and daughter looked through their dingy and almost broken cabinets to pack up their clothes. "Mommy, where are we going?" the daughter asked, looking out her window sadly. "We're going to another town, sweetie," answered the mother, who looked through all the tattered clothes and dirted shirts they had. "But why?" the daughter asked again. The mother sighed and walked over to her daughter. She caressed the little girl's cheeks and smiled. "It's because Daddy is going to find another job in a smaller place." "But what about his previous job?" the daughter asked. "Didn't he say that he was close to getting a promotion?" The mother tried to keep the smile on her face, but her facade got slowly broken down as she realized the sad reality they were living in. "Something happened, sweetie. The company that your father works for is going to close," the mother answered truthfully. The daughter pouted. "He said that he will buy me a chocolate bar once he gets that promotion. Is he going to break his promise?" The mother cuddled her daughter tightly. She couldn't bear to disappoint her daughter, but unfortunately, there were just some things that they could not control. Her husband worked for the Hammerstone Company as one of the thousands of blacksmiths in their arsenal. Although the pay was low, they made it work. They may live in the slums, but at least they were in Angora City, where they could someday enroll their daughter in the Magic Tower or one of the good schools here. Unfortunately, she awakened this morning to the news that the Hammerstone Company was shutting down. She knew what this meant for her husband and her family. Without the money to pay for their daily expenses, they would have to move away and settle for a smaller place. The only problem was that they didn't even have enough money to buy transportation. If they had to move, they would have to walk the entire way there, which would probably take months. Her headache worsened as she thought about the hardships her daughter was about to face. She couldn't bear to let her go through it. Just then, the door to their house burst wide open, with her husband coming in with a huge smile on his face. "Honey, what are you doing?" she said worriedly. "You almost broke our door. How are we going to pay for that?" The man wearing overalls stained with grease rushed over to his wife and picked her up by her waist. "WH," she screamed out. "What's gotten into you?" The man gave her a big peck in the lips before putting her down and then going over to his daughter, hugging her tightly. "Daddy, Daddy, why do you look so happy?" she asked, giggling. "It's because I just got hired," the man screamed, elation painted all over his face. "Really? That's great, honey. And it's not just that," the man said, getting something for his backside pocket. "I have this for you, my dear." He gave a rectangular bar with a violet and gold wrapper. In the middle it said, "Reborn chocolates." "Chocolates? You got me chocolates, Daddy." The daughter immediately began unwrapping the cover. "Honey, that chocolate is quite expensive. Are you sure we can afford that?" his wife asked. "We can now. I can buy my daughter 100 chocolate bars if she wants to. We can even move out of the slums and live in a place that isn't constantly flooding and leaking whenever there's rain." The man began explaining to his wife about the job he got offered from the Reborn company. It was at least 5 times the normal pay, and he didn't even have to work for 4 straight days and nights per week to do it. And you know what the best part of it all? The man asked. The owner of Reborn is offering to awaken anyone that wants to awaken, even our families. He grabbed his wife's shoulders. Did you hear this, honey? Our daughter has a chance to become a mage. Overwhelmed with all of this, his wife collapsed onto the floor with tears streaming down her face. Even he was caught up in her emotions and cried happy tears with her on the floor of their 1-bedroom house. Their daughter happily munched on the chocolate bars, with bliss and happiness filling their household. They were not the only family who felt the generosity of the Reborn company today. Everyone who thought they lost their jobs ended up getting even better ones than before. Michael gave them meaningful work, which seemed to be perfectly in line with their own strengths and talents that they didn't even know they had. It only took about 3 days before the previous Hammerstone company was completely integrated into the Reborn company. Even the assets, mainly the Hammerstone building located on the best part of the city, was starting its renovation to become a second department store for the Reborn company. It became a very busy few days for Michael and the Rebornians, with the wintertime coming in fast. About a week later, Michael finally became 12 years old. Michael didn't have anything special planned for his birthday. In fact, he specifically reminded everyone to not have prepared anything lavish or excessive. A simple get-together would have sufficed. Of course, Lord Michael, we shall prepare only a small party for you, Shiina replied with a smile. He didn't know if he believed that. Knowing Shiina, she definitely had something else planned. I'm serious, Shiina. I just want us to focus on the Reborn company. The next few days will be crucial for us because the Golden Road is about to be connected. Since he had permission from the Duke himself, Michael and the Reborn company finally restarted the Golden Road project. Construction workers were already pouring concrete and flattening the roads just a few kilometers away from the gates. Once the road was done, then the citizens of Angora City could finally visit Neo Orcus. And once they visited that, they would have to visit the King's region and the nation of Reborn as well. The Golden Road was essentially a funnel that drove all commerce to paradise in the parched lands. Don't worry, Lord Michael. We have the road under control. Planning your birthday party won't take away from everyone's time too much, Shiina said giddily. Everyone, ahem. Well, I better get going, she said, skipping out of his room and coincidentally avoiding his question. He took a deep breath and fell back to his bed. He decided to sleep now and recharge his social batteries for when the birthday party started. But just as he was about to sleep, he suddenly heard a knock on his door. Who is it? He asked. It's Butch, sir, the previous leader of the Hammerstone company. Michael got up and opened the door, seeing the well-armored bald man standing in front of him. After integrating them to the nation of Reborn, Michael hired a lot of the Hammerstone adventurers to become bodyguards for the company. Their strength was definitely needed with the expansion. What's the reason for your visit? He asked, inviting the man in. Butch walked inside his room and respectfully stood in place. When Christian was escorted out by his family out of Angora City, they approached me and told me to give you a message. What is it? He asked, confused as to why the Hammerstone family would want to contact him. It concerns the Hammerstone inventory, sir. They want to give you something as a sign of goodwill. Michael raised his eyebrow. Duke Stelmane told him that Christian's father was sorry for his son's actions, and it seemed he was right. This was the man's way to try and reconcile with him, it seems. What's the gift? It contained in Christian's hidden stash, sir. Michael sensed a sense of fear from Butch. Did you see it? He asked, and Butch nodded. The bald man took a second of breath and explained what he saw. It's a flaming piece of metal, sir. I tried prodding it with a metal stick, and it burned it into ashes. Nothing worked. Everything this flame touched is torn asunder. Michael's eyes widened. Butch's description seemed very familiar. It was as if he was talking about the flaming ball of fire from a god forge. Take me there, he said hurriedly. Butch nodded and did as Michael told. He led Michael to an abandoned mansion near the outskirts of Angora City. Technically, this land wasn't part of the Hammerstone branch, so Michael didn't even know this existed in the first place. It's over there, Butch said as he jumped over the ledge of a destroyed window that was previously barred with wooden planks. They walked over to the master bedroom, which seemed to be in tip-top shape. There was even a cup of water by the bed. Butch then opened a hidden hatch on the wooden floor to reveal a rectangular box made out of Damascus steel. "This is it, boss. It's his secret safe." Magic detected, ChatJK4 informed him. The metal box is imbued with a 7-star spell called Contain Magic that prevents any mana from leaking outside its container. Curious, Michael walked over to the box and lifted the lid. And immediately, a bright light illuminated his face. And if it weren't for the captivating object hidden within the box, Michael would have turned away his eyes in fear of going blind. But he couldn't. He had to stare at the floating piece of metal in the box. This metal was like a small shaving from a rounded piece. It was a little bit smaller than his pinky's fingernail and about as thin as paper. And surrounding this floating piece of metal was a familiar ball of white flame that seemed to emanate a kind of danger that a wild, untamed animal could only produce. The fire flickered as Michael looked at it, as if warning him to stay away. In just one look, Michael was sure that this was a piece of the Godforge. Small, yes, but a part of it nonetheless. He couldn't believe that such a valuable piece of relic would just be sitting here under the floorboards of an abandoned house without any care at all. This thing was much more valuable than the entire Angora city combined. He reached for it with his fingers. Butch warned him about its dangers, but he knew that he could withstand its fire. After all, he withstood the unity flames of the much bigger Godforge and survived without much problem. As his finger reached the ball of flames, the metal began to quiver as it tried to burn Michael's entire hand. He didn't know why, but he felt that if this metal had a mouth, it would call him insolent for even daring to try and touch it. "Sorry, but you're just a piece," he said as a prismatic shield appeared around his hand, clashing with the ball of unity flames. His fingers slowly pierced through the fire before eventually reaching the quivering piece of Godforge. As soon as he made contact with it, the piece suddenly stopped quaking. It seemed to recognize the power that was taking a hold of it. "That's right," he said to the piece. "I can return you to your rightful place." As soon as he did, the flaming ball of unity protecting the piece suddenly dissipated, lightening the air significantly and making Butch breathe normally again. Michael smiled before trying to grab the floating piece. However, the piece suddenly shot out from the metal box and straight into his chest, causing him to fly straight through the wall and go through the other side. He ended up on the ground next to the kitchen, with powdered paint and splintered wood all over his hair and face. He was caught off guard. He looked down at his chest and saw a tear in his leather armor. He ripped his clothes and saw a hole in his chest. Panicked, he tried to claw the piece out of his body, but the injury he sustained immediately healed back up without any warning. "What the hell?" he shouted out loud. "ChatJK4, why didn't you protect me?" For all the times when his unity defense failed him, it had to be this time. But suddenly, he heard a ding in his mind as there was a bell inside it. "Godforge progress, 3%. What just happened?" "I'm not sure," ChatJK4 answered. And for the first time, his personal AI assistant seemed confused. He didn't know if it was because it grew to be more human with every software update, or it was because of the strange metal that seemed to have embedded itself in his chest. "I'm searching for all the information written on the Godforge, but everything comes up blank. There is no precedent for this occurrence." "Great, great. What a great birthday gift," he said sarcastically. "Can you at least tell me if it's good or bad? Should I worry about the metal in my chest? There seems to be no adverse effect on your physical well-being. Your mana cores are running at perfect condition as well." "What is it?" "I seem to have discovered where the metal fragment is located, and it has merged itself with your mana cores." Michael closed his eyes and focused on his internal body. There, he saw the 8 spheres of mana floating in an endless black space. Everything looked normal at first, but upon closer inspection, Michael finally noticed a very thin line connecting all the mana cores to each other, creating an octagram of sorts. There was no mistake about it. It was the piece of the Godforge, just stretched out into a hair-like strand. As for why it had attached itself to his cores, he had absolutely no idea. As for its effects, Michael knew nothing as well. Everything worked fine with his mana, and everything flowed smoothly with his cores. It is recommended to gather more Godforge pieces so that the effects would be a lot more pronounced. Michael wasn't exactly that enthusiastic about having another metal piece shoot through his chest, but he was calm-headed enough to know that the Godforge piece was an incredible piece of relic from the past. With the power it held in its prime, Michael was sure that if it wanted to harm him, it would have done so already. And besides, Michael already promised the Dwarven King to gather all the Godforge pieces he could find. At least now, it would be safe in his chest. "Are you okay, boss? What happened?" Butch asked worriedly. He shuddered at the thought of the white-scaled dragonborn finding out that Michael got hurt while he was around. "It's fine," he answered before levitating himself back up. "Let's go home. I have some questions that I need to ask a friend." Michael ascended from the shadows in the corner of a grandly decorated room, with furniture decorated with gold and red velvet. Near the balcony was a man who watched calmly as he overlooked the skyline of Angora City. "Stelmane," Michael called out. The Duke turned around and was surprised to see Michael, but not too shocked to see him appear in his personal lodging. "What brings you here?" Michael walked over to the balcony and joined the Duke for tea. "I have a question I have to ask you. It's about Christian and the Hammerstone family." Duke Stelmane finished a sip of his tea. "What would you like to know? They seem to have given me a gift." "Well, it's more like a leftover piece that they didn't bother to retrieve. It was in Christian's personal stash after all." The Duke looked at Michael. "Is it a strange, flaming piece of metal?" Michael sat up straight. "You know it?" Stelmane nodded. "I have heard of those, yes." "Those?" Michael's eyebrows perked up. "If you remember our conversation a few days ago, I told you about the conglomerates and the sub-companies inherited by their heirs, right? Well, as far as I heard, on their 10th birthday, those inheritors receive a piece of a magical metal that cannot be touched nor destroyed. This metal has no use at all and mostly serves as a decoration piece for fireplaces and tables." Michael almost cringed as he heard that. He couldn't imagine having a powerful piece of the Godforge just laying around like a piece of furniture. Imagine the waste. Why do they even receive this metal? The Duke shrugged his shoulders. "I do not know either, but I do know that they place great importance on it, especially by those conglomerates. They make it as a test for their inheritors. If they are able to keep their magical piece, then they are viable to become a successor. It's a weird tradition in my opinion, but those conglomerates have always been weird." Michael looked over the skyline of Angora City as he digested what he learned. As it turned out, the Godforge pieces were spread apart and in possession by the heirs and successors of the conglomerates. Christian was supposed to be an heir for the Hammerstone family, but after the incident with Michael, he was stripped of all his inheritances. "Why did Christian's father give me a piece if it's so important?" The Duke laughed, almost chuckling as he sipped tea. "That is typical of him. It's his way of respecting what you have built in the Reborn company. Even though your company is not tied to any conglomerate, he is treating you as part of their competition. In a way, you already are, aren't you? Since you're building your own golden road. I guess all he's trying to say is that he challenges you to beat those arrogant successors to teach them a lesson." Michael looked down at his chest, where the Godforge piece was hidden in his cores. Those sub-companies have been given a piece of the Godforge, and they're in a competition with each other to establish their own golden road. Inevitably, they would have to fight against each other, with one side potentially losing everything to the other, including the Godforge piece. And whoever wins the Golden Road competition would eventually gather a lot of the Godforge pieces for themselves. "I have a feeling that's on purpose," he thought to himself. "There must be a reason why those conglomerates want their heirs and successors to gather the Godforge pieces." Michael looked at the distance, further towards the Queen's region where the Vanderbilt Kingdom was located. "Grandfather, you know something about the Godforge, don't you?" Michael returned to the Reborn headquarters and sat in his bed. With all the mystery surrounding the Godforge pieces, Michael became a lot more determined in gathering all the pieces he could find. He thought he would find the Godforge pieces in secret tombs or hidden underground passages. But as it turned out, he just had to continue northwards. Those sub-companies have them. Michael was sure that Flare Corp had one too, since they were a direct heir of the Oscorp conglomerate. Michael knew what he had to do. He had to up the pace of his golden road. He got out of his bed and rushed to the Dragonborn's dormitory. There he saw everyone together in a circle, seemingly planning and wrapping gifts together. "Michael, you weren't supposed to be here yet," Eunice said, hiding the gift behind her back. "Lord Michael, please close your eyes." "Bro Mike, look what I got you. It's a piece of tooth I got from 5. Ho ho, my gifts are what are they again?" Michael looked at everyone with a smile. "Change of plan, guys. We're going to party." Lord Michael, is this your idea of a birthday party?" Shiana asked, disappointed. When Michael announced to them that they were going to party, they all thought of large festivities all around the territories of the nation of Reborn, the King's Region, Neo-Orcus, and Angora City, with everyone chanting Michael's name in honor for his birthday. But instead, Michael gathered the new, adopted employees of the Reborn company from the previous Hammerstone company and began awakening their talents one by one. "Of course, Shiana, it's a skill giveaway party," Michael said enthusiastically. Meanwhile, the leader of the adopted Rebornians, Butch, approached Michael with worried steps. "Boss, what are we supposed to do?" he asked. Michael sat in his birthday seat. "It's just a normal wooden chair," and gestured for Butch to come closer. "Tell me what kind of skill you want. What kind of power do you dream of having?" Butch looked at Michael, not knowing if his boss was being serious. He thought this was some kind of weird job interview. After thinking it through, Butch came up with an answer. I want something that will turn me into a volcano," he said. "A volcano, you say?" Michael uttered, activating his gift bestow skill. "Chat JK4, can you do your magic?" "Very well." Creating a customized skill perfect for Butch. Complete. Bodily magma, eruption, earth and fire element. This magic allows the user to erupt with their inner power, excreting magma out of their pores. A bright light suddenly glowed out of Butch's chest, which grew bright enough to blind anyone that looked at him. After a few seconds, the light subsided, leaving Butch the same as he was before. Butch looked at his hands, with his eyes flashing with understanding as the magic theory flashed through his brain. "Erupt!" he shouted, and suddenly magma pooled out of his bald head and down into his forehead, creating a literal fiery, hot hairstyle. "Whoa! Ha ha ha, yes!" Butch shouted in happiness. "Okay, next," Michael said, gesturing for the next person to approach. Michael spent the rest of the day giving away skills and spells to anyone who wanted them. Luckily, he also found a couple of people who could have a second awakening, which led them to find their true talent in another job. At the end of the day, Michael was too busy to attend the lavish and luxurious party that Shiana and the rest of the Rebornians planned out for him. Michael could hear the sounds of drums banging and trumpets ringing outside the Reborn headquarters from the festivities going on in the streets of Angora City. There were posters plastered everywhere with Michael's face painted on it, forcing everyone to celebrate his birthday. And if Michael looked at Neo-Orcus and the King's Region, he would see an even more fervent celebration. Fireworks and drinks flowed heavily, with everyone treating it as a local holiday to thank the man that gave them everything they had right now. Even the Dwarven King participated in the feast in the parched lands. Of course, Michael didn't really want his birthday to be such a big deal in the first place, so he was very thankful to have an excuse to miss it. Michael now sat in his bed, alone and satisfied. "Knock, knock. It's Yuna," she said. Michael got up and opened the door, seeing Yuna with her hands behind her back. "What's up?" he asked her. "I just wanted to give you something to celebrate your birthday. I don't know if you'll appreciate it, since I'm bad at making things." Yuna revealed a small wooden sculpture of a globe. But not just any globe, it was the Earth that he was so familiar with back in his previous life. "It's a reminder that no matter how crazy things may happen here, I want you to know that you can talk to me if you get homesick. We're in this together after all." Michael looked at the crude sculpture and realized that Yuna used no magic to create this. She shaved the wood all by herself, mistakes, imperfections, and all. But this made it all the more special. After all, Michael had been so used to magic that he used it for everything he needed. This small gesture was heartfelt. "Thank you," he said to her. Yuna smiled. "That just means you'll have to work harder to give me my favorite ice cream, okay?" Michael laughed and swore that he would do so soon. After making him do a pinky promise, she left, leaving Michael all alone in his room. He put the globe statue near his bed and went to sleep. The next day, the Golden Road project continued at full force. As for Angora City itself, Michael instructed the Rebornian engineers to start the full restoration of all the buildings caught up in the fighting. The library that had been out of commission for the past week was quickly built anew in just a matter of a full day. The houses whose roofs were destroyed were quickly patched up within just a few hours as well. This showcased the full potential of concrete to the citizens of Angora City. How did they do it so fast? They used that liquid stone thing, and it hardened in just a few hours. How is that possible? Look, guys, they opened a new floor in the Reborn department store, and I think it sells sacks of this concrete thing. The clear difference in quality between the Reborn company and everyone else in Angora City showed why they were truly deserving of that number 450 rank in the Golden 500. And it didn't stop there. A few days after that, the citizens of Angora City woke up to see a wide road suddenly constructed out of their gates leading to the horizon. Sharp-eyed people recognized the material they used in this road to be concrete, which meant that this was the handiwork of none other than the Reborn company. And not even a few hours later, the citizens of Angora City were once again surprised at the appearance of large automobile trucks that came into the city. These trucks carried lots and lots of products and resources that stocked up the Reborn department store with unique products only available in the King's region. Isn't this the Wadash powder? It's so rare, but they have a whole card here available. How do they transfer pot break herb here from the King's region without it dying? I heard it dies after a week of getting uprooted. Hey, that road, where does it lead to? It wasn't long before people began to travel the Golden Road, leading them straight to Neo-Orcus. There, it discovered a society so advanced that it completely blew their mind. But then, they were told that to see the true extent of the Reborn Company's power, they should visit the parched lands. And just like Michael hoped, people began to travel to the King's region to see the end of the road, the nation of Reborn. The Golden Road allowed people to finally travel between Angora and Neo-Orcus within just a few days of travel. This was already an amazing fact that brought the Reborn Company a lot more praise and recognition from the citizens of Angora City. However, the real game changer came when they offered a taxi service using the metal carriages called automobiles. This was where the public truly realized the true potential of cars. After constructing the Golden Road, Michael fulfilled his promise to guide the Duke and his wife on a tour of the King's region and the nation of Reborn. Using the customized automobile that Michael gave to the Duke, they embarked on a few days' journey to Neo-Orcus. The Duke saw firsthand how amazing it felt to drive almost 100 kilometers per hour on the flat Golden Road. Upon arriving, the pair couldn't believe the sophistication, the order, and the quality of life in Neo-Orcus. This town was previously known for being abandoned and almost buried in the ground. Yet, what they saw was something that could only be described in fantasy books. There, they came into contact with electricity and trains. Amazing, the Duke uttered, completely bewitched by Neo-Orcus. He saw a vision of an entirely new Angora City, one with automobiles running through the streets, stopped only by stoplights to let pedestrians through. He saw a vision of buildings lit up by tiny stars in the night. He saw the future. The Duke immediately expressed his interest in creating a railway system for Angora City, while his wife requested to have air conditioners available in their castle. "Let's talk business after you finish the tour," Michael said to them. After all, they only saw a glimpse of what was to come. They hadn't seen the nation of Reborn yet. So, they embarked on the train leading to the King's region. Of course, they stopped by the Dwarven Kingdom where the Duke got to meet its king, which seemed to have made him into a blubbering fool. He was too flustered to meet someone that was notoriously known to be hard to meet. "Michael, you weren't there to celebrate your birthday, so I drank twice as much in your honor," Byru said while gulping another cup of beer. "Thanks, I guess." The Dwarven King soon left after being forced by his men to finish some paperwork. "You are close with the dwarves? I thought you knew." Michael shrugged. After the Duke calmed down and explained to Michael how unprecedented this was, they continued on their tour to the king's region and onto the parched lands. Finally, the Duke and his wife stepped foot onto the nation of Reborn. He gave them a day to explore by themselves. After that, Michael met with them in their hotel room in one of the Satter's treehouse. So what do you think? Duke Stellman and his wife looked at Michael with crazed eyes. We want to stay here forever. Michael returned back to Angora City with a massive headache. After experiencing the comfort and extravagant lifestyle in the nation of Reborn, the Duke refused to go back to his so-called Bitless bathroom in his castle. This was quite a common occurrence with tourists in their nation, but Michael didn't think it would affect even a Duke who had a literal city under his name. Just manage the city for me, he said. Doesn't he know how unusual this is, giving the keys to his city to a total stranger? He decided to let the Duke take a well-deserved vacation in the parched lands until he became a little bit more reasonable. Back in his bed, Michael summoned two shadows in front of him. How's the reception to the Golden Road? Michael asked the two shadow orc leaders, Naruto and Sasuke. It's been tremendous, boss. A lot of merchants and ordinary people are traveling down the road in droves. We had to implement a rule on the road to keep the carriages on the right lane while the automobiles were on the left lane, Naruto reported. That's good thinking, Michael complimented them, which Naruto reciprocated by smacking his chest and biceps loudly. Be you too. I thank thee for your appreciation, boss. Sasuke bit his lips and stood up. Our taxi service in the city is doing well too, boss. In fact, we had to increase the capacity of our Reborn buses to accommodate the demand. As expected, the rental Reborn automobiles were the most popular service in the city. After all, this was the chance that they could see how fast a car traveled from the inside, making automobiles a lot more popular as a result. I have already ordered a large batch of automobiles to be delivered here in anticipation, so we were able to lessen the queue in the taxis, Sasuke said proudly. You too, Sasuke. Good job. Are tata. I am honored by your appreciation, Sasuke said, with his quills thrumming. Michael was satisfied with the positive reaction of Angora City to the Reborn innovative products. They were a lot more receptive to the strange automobiles than he thought. What about the other companies in the city? What were their opinions of all of this? Because of the sudden boom of Reborn products in the city, almost all the revenue stream was pouring into Michael's pockets alone. His department store was bringing in products at a faster rate and at an even cheaper price. Not a lot of companies could compete. As expected, their sales and profits are down, said Naruto. However, they know better than to antagonize us. Instead, they're using this chance to purchase concrete and automobiles for their own companies. Michael nodded. That's smart of them. He wasn't planning on monopolizing the entire market. He was simply showing to the other companies how efficient his automobiles were in transporting goods. And, coupled with concrete, it was a recipe for success, which was something they can try and replicate. Also, sir, the royals in the castle are becoming a lot more uneasy with the prolonged absence of the Duke. Michael sighed. He didn't think the Duke would cause such trouble. Ignore them. The Duke will return soon. Do you have anything else to report? The two shadow orcs nodded. Lately, there have been more and more visitors entering Angora City of late. We found out that they are people from the big companies in the nearby territories. They must have read the newspaper by now, he guessed. That is right, boss, Naruto agreed. Our shadow orcs in the other territories are all reporting that the news of our sponsorship in Angora is spreading to a lot of networks. And they're sending in their feelers to find out more about us. The common sentiment among them is that they are doubtful as to how an unranked company suddenly jumped to number 450 in the world and even ended up sponsoring a capital city. Michael expected this. That's fine. Let them. We have also used this chance to send out our shadow orcs into infiltration missions into those companies. They send out spies, we latch out shadows to them, and they lead us right to their company, said Naruto. Tell me if you find out that any of them is an heir or successor from a conglomerate. The two shadow orcs nodded. After finding out where the Godforge pieces were located, Michael decided to become a lot more proactive in finding those conglomerate subsidiaries like the Hammerstone Company. Of course, It would be a lie if he said he didn't want to obtain their God-forged peace for himself. With the success of the Golden Road connecting Angora to Neo-Orcus, Michael felt it appropriate to finally expand further out to the Queen's region. ChatJK4, can you show me an optimal route for the Golden Road that will efficiently go through all the territories in the Queen's region? Understood, Michael. Generating a map for you. After a few seconds, Michael saw a topographical 3D image of the royal continent, specifically the lower part of the Queen's region containing Angora City and Neo-Orcus. Right now, a yellow path representing the Golden Road connected the two Reborn-influenced territories into a sort of highway. Then, a glowing yellow line flowed from Angora City to further northwards, about a month's worth of travel, to a small named location called Batroc Town, the supposed territory that was recently conquered by Flare Corp, a subsidiary of the Oscorp conglomerate. Now, if he was being selfish, he would want to connect the Golden Road directly to Batroc Town in order to force a confrontation between the two of them. After all, Michael knew for certain that the leader of Flare Corp was in possession of a God-forged piece. But if he were to do that, it would mean that he would be missing out on the 10 or so territories on the left and right sides of Angora City. Although those places were smaller and arguably less important than Batroc Town, Michael needed to spread Reborn there too. After all, the main reason he was doing all of this in the first place was to spread the comfort and pleasurable lifestyle that only the Reborn company could give to the people of this world. If he were to abandon them, then that would be tantamount to abandoning his core principles. ChatJK4, please make a blueprint for the Golden Road to branch towards all these territories on the east and west sides of Angora City. Understood, Michael. This is the most strategic course of action that you could take. Why do you think so? By spreading your influence and completely conquering the southernmost tip of the Queen's region, there would be no way for your opponents to flank your territories. As usual, ChatJK4 was right. Michael should have thought about the military aspect of expanding the Golden Road. The Queen's region was totally different from the tame and docile territories of the King's region. This place had competition, and they wouldn't back down so easily once they saw Reborn coming, as evidenced by what happened with the Hammerstone Company. All right, thanks ChatJK4. I'll have our engineers start the construction right away. Michael spent the rest of the day conversing with the Rebornian engineers, who quickly fulfilled his wishes and began their construction in the east and west gates of Angora City. He thought he would have had to ask for permission from the Duke, but it seemed he had already sent a letter giving Reborn the authorization to do whatever they wanted in Angora City, which may or may not have caused the royals to panic, because Michael was now essentially the acting Duke of the city itself. The appearance of automobiles caused a boom in the commerce of Angora City and beyond. Products were being delivered faster than before. Rare items which were so hard to obtain could now be purchased in the Reborn department store, and more people were traveling to other places in the royal continent because of the Golden Road. Those in the Queen's region traveled by automobile or train to the King's region, and vice versa. This created a lot of opportunities for businesses to thrive, further driving the economy of the territories involved in the Golden Road. Eventually, this caused other territories in the east and west side of Angora City to become slightly aware of what was happening. The newspaper article had already created an intrigue among them, but the increased activity in Angora City certainly caught their attention. One such group took particular attention. This group, for lack of a better term, were unscrupulous in their ways to obtain a living wage. If you were to ask them what they did, then they would answer that they were in the security business, protecting merchants, travelers, and other such visitors from meeting a terrible fate in the woods. As long as people paid a good number of coins, then those tourists could be assured that they would not be attacked deep in the night while they camped. Of course, they didn't have to tell anyone that they were the one who attacked people in the night. It was already implied. They were the so-called bastard bandits who lived in the South Tip Forest, the large patch of greenery that separated Angora City from the rest of the Queen's region. Despite the dangers of wild animals, occasional monsters, and dangerous cliffs, the bastard bandits had made a home for themselves in the South Tip Forest. They had claimed it to be theirs, despite having no jurisdiction or credentials to back it up. And because of that, they charged a measly toll on anyone that tried to travel through the South Tip Forest. If they were obedient and paid their fee, then they would find their journey in the forest to be safe and boring. If they didn't, then they would find their products stolen or their lives taken. They had made quite a living doing this, living quite lavishly in the caves of the forest. But recently, they had noticed that there was a large influx of carriages coming from the north to the south, specifically the famous Angora city. This was an anomaly. It was already deep into the winter season, which meant that travel shouldn't be too welcome among the populace. Now, usually, this would have been a cause for celebration for the whole troop. More tourists meant more tolls, and more tolls meant more money for them to warm their bodies with booze. However, a few observant bandits noticed that despite the large influx of carriages coming from the north, there was a distinct lack of carriages coming from the south. It was as if they reached Angora City and chose to never come back at all. The bastard bandit leader immediately tasked his men to capture one of the travelers and question them for information. They laid in wait in the snowy bushes as a single carriage led by 2 horses came trotting past their hiding spot. "Halt!" they shouted. The horses were immediately startled, neighing crazily and standing on their front legs. The man in the carriage peeked out of his window and saw the snowy bushes suddenly stand up, revealing themselves to be bandits who had camouflaged themselves with pure white gear. The sharp weapons they held in their hands immediately was enough to make the man in the carriage consider surrender. "What's the meaning of this? I pay my fees," he shouted to them. "Don't worry, we're not going to hurt you," one of the bandits said. "We're just here to ask some questions." The bandits approached his carriage and forcefully opened it, letting the cold breeze of the air enter. Then, one of the bandits stepped foot inside and sat on the opposite side, meeting face to face with the merchant. "First of all, an introduction is in order. I am Sleazy, and you are?" The merchant eyed the man suspiciously before answering. "I'm just an ordinary merchant. I sell chocolates." The bandit called Sleazy titled his head, clearly unaware of such a product called chocolate. I've never heard of that. And I see no sign of products here in your carriage." Sleazy took out a knife out his pocket and twirled it in his hands, with its glint reflecting towards the chocolate merchant. "Are you lying to me?" "No, no, no," the chocolate merchant cried out, raising his hands to protest his innocence. "It's true. I just sold out all my products. That's why I'm returning to Angora City to get more." The bandit eyed the merchant with a glare, letting awkward silence linger in the carriage. "I believe you. Haha, don't be so anxious," Sleazy said, patting the chocolate merchant's shoulder. "Listen, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I just have to know. Is there a particular reason why a lot of people are going to Angora City?" The chocolate merchant went silent for a second. His first instinct was to lie. After all, he didn't want Michael and the Reborn company to get into trouble. But then, he remembered that Michael specifically told them to always spread the word about the Reborn products, whether they be customers or criminals alike. The merchant even remembered a saying from Michael: "All press is good press," meaning any and all kinds of attention would benefit the Reborn company. So, he simply told them what the public already knew. He told them about the newspaper article being spread around. "It's good to know you aren't lying to me," Sleazy said, putting his knife back in its sheath. "We have asked all the other carriages coming in Angora City, and they all said the same thing. They want to visit the famous Reborn company." "So, you knew about them?" Sleazy nodded and laid back on his seat. "Oh yeah, we might be living in the woods, but we are not hermits. We are in touch with the current happenings of society more than you know. Of course, we heard about the current ranked hashtag 450th company in the world. It's just hard to believe that it's true." That was not the first time the chocolate merchant heard that. One of the reasons why there were so many people visiting Angora City was because people were curious to see if the stories were true or not. It seemed that it had reached the ears of the bandits as well. "Clap." Sleazy clapped his hands, surprising the merchant out of his thoughts. "Well, that's all that I want to ask you today. Thank you for your cooperation." The chocolate merchant watched as Sleazy got out of his carriage and waved at him with a big smile on his face. The bandit gestured for the coachman to go, which prompted the old man to whip the reins and let the horses start trotting through the snowy road. As the carriage got further and further away, The chocolate merchant looked back to see the road completely empty with no sign of the bandits anywhere. The snowy tracks on the road were just the horse and the carriage, nothing more. The chocolate merchant decided to visit the Rebornians and tell them what happened today as fast as possible. Meanwhile, in the bushes, the 10 or so bastard bandits gathered around in a circle with Sleazy in the middle. "What are we going to do, Sleazy?" one of the bandits asked. "I'm feeling a little curious, you see. All those stories about the horseless metal carriages and dwarven metal seem to have made me a little bit thirsty," he said, licking his mouth. The other bandits looked at Sleazy with worried expressions. "Sleazy, the boss said that we shouldn't interfere in other territories. We should just stick to the South Tip Forest, and that's it." "I agree," a bandit said. "And even if I do want to pinch a little bit of gold out of their pockets, we should only do it when they try to travel through the forest, not when they're still in their territory." Sleazy shook his head amongst the other bandits, clicking his tongue as he did so. "You guys are so unambitious," he shouted. "Come on, don't you see that we're not the only ones that's thirsty to rip apart this new Reborn company? I'm betting that if we wait any longer, other companies would have already conquered the Reborn company and taken all their inventions for themselves." The bandits, despite being reasonable this whole time, felt a little bit agitated upon hearing Sleazy's words. It provoked their killer instinct. If there was anyone that was going to prey upon this new and improving company, then it should be them. But didn't they say that this company defeated those Hammerstone guys? And not only that, they're ranked number 450 as well. Don't they have pretty strong fighters for doing that? Sleazy waved off the bandit's concern. "Come on, that Hammerstone company is managed by a nepotism kid. It's not that hard to destroy a house built upon fragile sticks. And besides, it's not like we're going on an all-out war with them. I'm just proposing that we shake them down a little bit, make their pockets bleed just enough for us to be set up for life. With how fast they're expanding, I'm sure that there will be some weak points that we can exploit. Ask yourselves who you were before we settled down in this forest. Weren't we free spirits who took what we wanted without any question?" The other bandits turned silent, with each one seriously beginning to consider Sleazy's proposal. "And not only that, but I heard that they have mithril relics up their sleeves." This little piece of bait seemed to have finally convinced the bandits to agree with Sleazy. They looked at each other with confident smiles and expectant gazes. They couldn't wait to get their hands on those gold coins that the Reborn company had been hoarding. "Let's go back to our lair. Don't tell anybody anything. We just prepare our things, and we leave in the night," Sleazy warned them. And with that, the bandits began trekking back deeper into the bald, snowy forest. "BU-2-2." Sleazy turned around, his eyes darting all over the place. He looked at the other bandits and saw none of them react to the rhythmic beating sound, making him doubt his own senses. He began to convince himself that it was just a product of his own imagination, brought on by the cold winds of the winter. Meanwhile, back in Angora City, Michael sat in his bed while the two Shadow Orc chieftains reported the whole situation to him in great detail. "It's a good thing that you guys had Shadow Orcs protecting the chocolate merchants," he said to them. "Even if they are not part of our nation, they're still important to the growth of your company. It is only natural that we dedicate a shadow to monitor them and their surroundings," Naruto replied. "What shall we do, boss?" Sasuke said, kneeling. "Shall we dispose of them?" Since they're acting out on their own, just monitor them. Maybe they would lead us to more information about the other territories near Angora City. Also, if they do try to rob us, then send the trainees. It'll be a good experience for them." The two Shadow Orcs nodded before descending back into the shadows. A couple of days later, the Golden Road expansion to the westward of Angora City went smoothly underway. The end goal would be reaching the isolated territories they're named the Graphic Cluster. These were a collection of small settlements, towns, and villages numbering in the double digits. There wasn't a centralized government that controlled these territories like how the Duke controlled Angora City, but they did have their own local government that kept everything in check. So that means that we can construct the Golden Road there without needing any permission? Michael asked Yuna. That's right. The citizens of these people would love nothing more than to have a viable road for them to traverse, she answered clearly. They have actually submitted a formal request to our family to ask for some assistance to this matter, But you know how it is. Without the proper funding, these road projects could never be accomplished. Luckily for them, Michael was in no shortage of gold at the moment. Construction of such a long road may cost a lot of money, but he knew that it would all pay off in the end, just like how business boomed once Angora City became connected to the King's region. Shiina, how's the progress? The white-scaled dragonborn laid down the papers on the table for Michael to see. We are about 67% of the way there, Lord Michael. It will probably take less than a week before we reach the first settlement. They had people working day and night to complete the Golden Road project, made possible through employing talented prospects from the King's region and Angora City combined. So, Yuna, those territories in the grafted cluster, is there anything I need to prepare? Yuna nodded. There are two major companies located in the grafted cluster, Barkus Incorporated and Bornik, which are ranked number 487 and number 486 respectively. They're both managed by a pair of twins who treat each other more as rivals rather than siblings. They used to have a very good relationship, but one of them branched off and created a new company that rivaled the original one. Now, they are both competing to try and outdo each other in the Golden 500 ranking. Michael was kind of surprised to see that a company ranked in the 400s would be located in such a remote part of the Queen's region. This meant that they were miles and miles better than the Hammerstone Company itself. I guess that's not a good comparison. The Hammerstone Company borrowed the Stone Cold Six from the Hephaestus conglomerate. That's why they were a little bit more powerful than usual. Fudge, are you there? Immediately, a violet slime jumped out of his shadows and landed onto his head. Fudge looked around the room and saw Yuna, immediately diving towards her, completely ignoring Michael. Who's a good ninja? Yuna said, patting Fudge. I am him. Ahem, Fudge. It was only after he coughed a second time did Fudge finally look back at Michael and saluted towards him. At your service, master. Did the Shadow Orcs find anything about the bastard bandits? He asked casually. Not yet, master. Those scammers are still in their cave hideout and preparing their stuff. Luckily, we already have Shadow Orcs being spread to all their members. It won't be long before we have them all under surveillance. Michael nodded, satisfied with the awesome work that the Shadow Orcs were doing. Since the Shadow Orcs are busy, then I'd like you to personally find out more about these two new companies, Barkus Incorporated and Born Incorporated. Fudge somersaulted out of Yuna's arms and did a superhero landing. As you wish, master. I shall send in my clones to infiltrate their operations and find out what they're hiding in their basements. Don't go too overboard. He warned Fudge, but the slime was already gone. In the very heart of the grafted cluster was a small town that was completely divided into two. On one side, the architecture and style of the buildings and structures were made completely out of wood and vines, making for a very earthy and natural vibe to the town. But on the opposite side of that was an entirely different style made out of stone and marble. The architecture was blocky and geometric, which was a complete tonal shift from the natural and curvy style of the opposite side. This was where the headquarters of Barkus Incorporated and Born Incorporated was located. This was where the two brothers created their companies and built it from the ground up before they clashed and split against each other. Right now, a Rebornian messenger stood at the very gates of this town and looked curiously at the contrasting architecture and style of the territory. Beneath his feet was his shadow cast from the sun already at its zenith. Strangely, his shadow seemed to flicker and move unnaturally even though the source of light remained static. Boss Fudge, I have arrived at the town. I shall now send the letter to the local government here. The messenger whispered to himself, and strangely, his shadow moved up and down as if nodding. The messenger then entered the town and asked for the directions until he reached the mayor's house. He introduced himself as a Reborn representative here to deliver news from Michael himself. The mayor didn't appear himself, but the letter was successfully delivered, making the messenger's job complete. He quickly got on his horse and rode off back to Angora City. But strangely enough, his shadow seemed to have been left behind in the mayor's house. It slithered through the guards in the front, bypassing the heavy metal doors through the small slits underneath it. Reaching inside, The shadow attached itself to a butler who walked up the winding stairs into the master bedroom. "Mayor," the butler said, knocking on the door. "There's a letter here for you addressed from the Reborn company." The mayor, a man with quite a large gut from eating good food, opened the door and took the letter from the butler before sitting back down at his desk. He looked at the red wax seal with a distinct R symbol on the front. "This is the real deal," he muttered. But before he could open the letter, his door suddenly burst wide open as two tall, lanky men with vastly different clothes, yet extremely similar faces came walking towards the mayor. "Barkis, Bullerin, I was just about to call for you," the mayor said. Barkis raised a sharp chin and put his hands on his clothes made entirely out of leaves and vines. "I heard something interesting came knocking at your door. Reborn? The hashtag 450th rank company in the world. I would like to see what they have to say." But before Barkis could walk forward and snatch the letter out of the mayor's hand, Bullerin got in the way. "Hold your horses there, brother. I would like to see it first," he said, crossing his arms and showing off his armor made out of heavy stones. The mayor looked flustered as he once again became caught up in the siblings' rivalry. "Either way, Mayor, don't get too caught up in what the contents of that letter will say. I don't believe that a no-name company could reach that rank so fast. There's got to be some kind of conspiracy going on," Barkis said, slamming his fist on the table. This made Bullerin smile. "That, I will agree with you, brother." For the twin brothers, seeing the Reborn company blow past their company ranking seemed almost impossible. They knew how hard they worked to achieve number 487 and number 486 respectively. It took almost 10 years for them, and they had to climb through the ranks one by one to do so. And unlike Christian Hammerstone, Barkis and Bullerin were both the strongest fighters in their own companies. So, they knew that advancing to that rank required really strong fighting skills that not just anybody could obtain. But didn't you hear that they defeated the Stone Cold Six? What do they call them? The Dragonborns. The mayor was a little bit more apprehensive in calling the newspaper articles as nothing more than rumors. He didn't necessarily believe its authenticity, but he just couldn't completely disregard it either. "It's just a myth," Barkis said, waving his concern. "I have never even heard of that demi-human species before. And frankly, I'm kind of worried for them that they will draw the ire of the dragons for using the draconic name, even though they aren't part of their lineage." In a rare occurrence, his brothers seemed to totally agree. "I have a few friends back in Angora City, and even they don't know what truly happened. After all, nobody saw what truly transpired that night. If anything even happened at all," he said confidently. The mayor looked at the letter in his hands hesitating whether he should open it or not. "I'm going to open it," he said. Using a very sharp letter opener, he took out the folded sheet of paper and began reading through its contents. His eyes parsed through the inked words, with his expression showing confusion and disbelief. "What is it?" the brothers asked simultaneously. "They're coming here," the mayor announced. "They want to build a road that connects the grafted cluster to Angora City. For free," he emphasized. "For free." Barkis immediately swiped the letter from the mayor's hands and read through it himself. "They even want to establish a friendly relationship with us. They're promising all sorts of benefits as well." "Let me see that," Bullerin said, grabbing the paper too. The mayor nervously began biting on his nails. The prospect of having a serviceable road connecting their cluster to a big capital city like Angora would truly change the economic status of their whole area. It would open up so many opportunities. The mayor was definitely in favor of the agreement. The two brothers could see it in the chubby man's face. Of course, this wasn't favorable to the two companies at all. They needed to keep the monopoly they had in the grafted cluster. "Mayor, you better reconsider your choices," warned Barkis. "For a decade, we have supported this town and the rest of the settlements with my generosity. Do not hog all the credit, brother. I have done even more for this cluster than your company could ever do in a lifetime," Bullerin shot back. "Really? Then why aren't you the ranked hashtag 486th company right now?" "Oh, right, that's me." The two twin brothers began bickering loudly again, entering into a shouting match that annoyed the mayor to no end. He really wanted to accept Reborn's offer. All those stories about having those horseless metal carriages and cheap vegetables tempted him to completely disregard the two brothers' opinions. However, he wasn't that courageous in disobeying them. After all, he had spent all the years of his term as mayor essentially becoming their lapdog. Just then, as the two brothers were busy arguing with each other, the mayor suddenly saw the whole room turn dark. He looked around hurriedly to see himself being engulfed in the shadows, unable to move and shout to warn the brothers. Eventually, all he could see was darkness all around him. What's happening?" he shouted. Just then, his whole world shook as a giant ball of violet slime, as big as a castle, jumped towards him. The colossal slime looked down at the mayor with a bit of a smile on its face. Are you a god?" the mayor questioned. Fu, yes," Fudge replied, his voice echoing endlessly in the dark void. "What do you want from me?" Fudge looked up, imitating the grandness of a godlike being. You are destined for a great future." "I am," the mayor asked, looking down at his own chubby belly in shame. Of course, Fudge coughed. "However, you are now at a fork road in your destiny. One path leads you to depression and despair, not just for yourself, but for the whole territory under your hands. But the other path is the complete opposite. It is your true destiny. It will lead you to wealth and prosperity unlike anything you have ever seen." The mayor looked up at the divine body of the slime god in front of him. His eyes showed a glint of hope and longing. What do I have to do?" Ho, Fudge laughed. "I think you already know, young man. The Reborn company," the mayor realized. Fudge's bulbous body suddenly grew two stump-like hands, using them to create a small rift in the darkness so that the mayor could see the distant image of the two brothers pointing and shouting at each other. The mayor could see what the two brothers were thinking. They were planning on creating a total blackout for the Reborn company, preventing their products from reaching the territories of the grafted cluster. "What should I do?" he asked the benevolent divine slime. "What is their weakness? What do they hate and desire the most?" Fudge asked. "Each other," the mayor answered. "They want to completely outdo one another." "Then the answer is simple. You shall." As the mayor heard the words echo in his mind, the darkness around him began to recess into the walls, returning him back into reality. Mayor, are you listening?" Barkus shouted. The mayor looked at himself and balled up his fist. Remembering the appearance of the slime god gave him a lot of courage. "Are you sure you guys want to reject the Reborn company?" he asked them. The twins looked back at the mayor, angry yet intrigued at his words. "Why not? The Reborn company is the hashtag 450th ranked company in the entire world. Imagine what would happen to your companies if it's suddenly reported that you guys were able to completely defeat them fair and square." Barkus and Bullrin's eyes widened as they began to realize the effects of the mayor's hypothetical question. "My company would soar through the rankings." Barkus muttered, "I'll finally be able to surpass him." Bullrin whispered, "The temptation of defeating a 450th ranked company was too great." The twins immediately exited the mayor's house and began preparing their companies for the competition against the Reborn company. Meanwhile, the mayor sighed in relief as he saw the twins leave. He looked up at the ceiling and brought his hands together as a prayer. "I hope that is satisfactory for your majesty," he muttered under his breath. Back at Angora City, Michael saw Fudge jump out of his shadows with a giant smile on his face. "What's up?" "Nothing, master. The west branch of the Golden Road should proceed smoothly now." A few days later, the Golden Road finally reached the first settlement in the grafted cluster. It was just a small village with a little over 300 citizens inside. The locals of this settlement saw firsthand how the Rebornian engineers poured the liquid concrete onto the pathway ditch and watched it harden within just a few hours with the help of a little magic. It completely surprised them, especially as the first few automobiles came riding from the horizon. These trucks carried over all the necessary equipment and products needed to create a base for the Reborn company here in this settlement. Michael even went above and beyond as he planned to create more amenities in this place, such as an underground well, to help raise the standard of living in the grafted cluster. After the automobiles arrived, He transported himself over there through his shadows and met with the local leader of the settlement to relay his intentions. "Are you the owner of the Reborn company?" the hunched old man asked Michael. This kind of surprised him a little bit, seeing as he hadn't even introduced himself yet. But the old man seemed to have known that he was its leader. "Yeah, how did you know?" The old man smiled and pointed at all the Rebornians laying down their materials from the automobile trucks. "They've been looking at you with respectful eyes all this time," he said. "That kind of respect can only be reserved for benevolent leaders such as yourself." He was flattered. "You've heard about us?" The old man nodded. "There's been a lot of talk about the new sponsor of Angora City, and despite my ears failing me, I can still hear well enough to have heard about you." Michael looked around and saw the underdeveloped state of the settlement. Most buildings were made out of wood and thatch, the roads were muddy, and there wasn't much foot traffic going around it. They didn't even have a market and only relied on traveling peddlers to get supplies. "Can we establish our company here? Build our own infrastructure?" The old man nodded and spread his hands. "You are very much welcome to do so. I'm planning on building a golden road that connects this place to Angora City. You can travel there in about 3 days through carriage, or just 1 day through our taxi automobile service." He also planned to create a bus station in every territory, allowing for normal people to travel easily to the big cities like Angora. Michael began instructing Kong, the Rebornian engineer chief, to start the construction in the settlement. Their first order of business was to create running water from the aquifer underground. It took them just an hour before a deep well hand pump was installed, giving clean water for the citizens to drink and bathe from. "Whoa, water!" a boy said as the water splashed on the ground from the pipes. The whole population of the settlement celebrated this momentous occasion, thanking the Rebornians by offering them dried deer meat and skinned rabbit fur. The old man approached Michael. "This may be presumptuous of me, but there is nothing we would like more than to be under your banner. You want to join the nation of Reborn?" "Yes, we would all like to," the old man replied with everyone nodding behind him. Michael didn't think it would be this easy. Not even a few hours after they landed in this settlement, and already he had accomplished his goal. He was just hoping to establish the company here, but he ended up gaining another territory. He had Shiina and Yuna take care of all the paperwork, and in just a matter of a few hours, they became official Reborn citizens. Back in the center town of the grafted cluster, the two twins each sat in their respective headquarters and commanded their companies to start a large campaign that spanned the whole Western Territory. "Gather all our merchants and our peddlers. I want them all to start going over all the territories near us, selling only Barkus Incorporated products. Sell potatoes, carrots, and even pepper spices at a large discount." And it seemed that his twin brother thought of the same thing. "Make sure that the whole market is drowned out by all of our products," Bulrin shouted to his employees. "I don't want anyone buying those Reborn products at all." Since they were much more established in the deeper parts of the grafted cluster, their campaign largely worked and increased their overall sales throughout the whole region. Their profits were down, but that was a necessary sacrifice to completely shut down the Reborn company's attempts. However, just a few days after this campaign started, the twins each received terrible news. "Sir Barkus, we can't sell anything in the first settlement," his messenger said anxiously. "And why is that? They're the ones that need fresh produce from us. Otherwise, they can't survive." The messenger bit his lips. "That's the thing, sir. The Reborn company has already arrived there and established a connection with them." That's fine," Barkus said. "Just lower the prices some more." "I doubt that the Reborn company can bear to lower the prices like we do, because they're transporting those goods all the way from Angora City. This is a war that they'll lose." The messenger tried to get the words out of his mouth, but couldn't bear to do so. Sir, the first settlement has already agreed to become part of the Reborn territory." "What?" Now that the first settlement was part of their territory, Michael decided to implement a lot of new establishments in the territory. Aside from basic stuff like concrete roads and plumbing systems, Michael also created a fun little hot spring-inspired bath for the people to enjoy. And just as Michael thought, this became a really popular spot for the locals. The large improvement in the first settlement eventually reached the next two territories in the grafted cluster, which Michael set his eyes onto next. The Golden Road branched into two paths once again as it reached towards those two places in just a matter of a few days. Those two settlements were a little bit bigger and more advanced than the first settlement. They had proper buildings and infrastructures to be called a town rather than a village. The wet markets in these places consisted of small local businesses who sourced their products from their own homes. Things like butchered pigs, metal pots and pans, and dirted vegetables were all made by their own citizens and sold to other citizens. However, unlike the wet market free-for-all, the Barkus Incorporated store was established in a building that was much more organized than most. Right now, the whole store had signs that showed prices slashed in half. This caused quite a line in the Barkus Incorporated store as people bought their products in a frenzy. However, this all changed when the citizens noticed the flat road being constructed in the distance. It was the famous Rebornians. A few days later, the Golden Road connected to their town and allowed for the automobile trucks to unload all their products onto the general market. The sudden appearance of unique products only found in the King's region, like the famous grassweed herb or the phrenic stone, completely changed the market landscape of this town. The Reborn company became all the rage within its citizens, buying their products and venturing out to the Golden Road to reach the first settlement in just a few hours. The mayor of this town immediately accepted Michael's offer to establish their own infrastructure in the territory, much to the dismay of the twin brothers. Barkus and Bulren only found out a couple of days later that their business in these territories almost came to a complete stop. What? How are they creating these roads so damn fast? Bulren screamed out. And how are they transferring these King's region products so cheaply? The transport and shipping costs of these items should far exceed what they're selling it at. I just don't understand it. Bulren became so bothered at the current situation that he ended up multitasking a few of his employees to become troublemakers for the Reborn company. Scare them just enough so that they'll be hesitant to step a foot further into the grafted cluster, he said to his employees. Threaten their merchants and show them your knives. You don't have to hurt them. Just make sure they get scared. This would have been a great plan if not for the Reborn company's tremendous defensive capabilities. First of all, Bulren never knew that there were shadow orcs planted all over his mansion and even under his very feet. They listened and watched for his every move, so Michael and the Rebornians were quickly given notice of what was about to happen. And second of all, those merchants weren't just ordinary people. They were Rebornians with an almost impenetrable defense as well. So, when the troublemakers sneaked into the Reborn camping site near the town, they didn't know what they were getting into. They entered into the tents of the Rebornian merchants and pulled a knife near their throats. Leave this place now, or else we'll come back to finish the job. However, as soon as the knives were about to reach their throats, an invisible prismatic shield appeared around the Rebornians and repelled the knives away from their hands. What? The troublemakers cried out as they saw their knives land in the ground. They stumbled forwards trying to catch it, but when they did, they suddenly realized that they were kneeling in front of a giant pair of feet that emanated a black fire. The troublemakers looked up and saw these humongous orcs looking down at them with red glinting eyes. And as soon as they made eye contact with the orcs, these troublemakers fell into illusions that showed them their deepest and worst nightmares. AGHH, they screamed, holding their heads in terror. Get me out of here. These troublemakers ran away, never to be seen again. Bulren tried to get a hold of them a couple of days later, but quickly found out that they disappeared without a single trace. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Bulren's twin brother was experiencing a very similar meltdown upon realizing the power of the Reborn company. I guess the rumors are true about those metal carriages, Barkus muttered, biting his nails nervously. And I thought this concrete thing was just a parlor trick. But I was wrong. It's the only reason as to how they're building the roads so damn fast. Barkus, unlike his twin brother, chose not to get heavy-handed in his attempt to oppose the Reborn company. Instead, he chose a different route. He now wished to study the Reborn company's methods of success to try to implement it into his own company. He could no longer treat this unknown company as a fraud that only bought their way up the rankings. After all, the results were as clear as day. In a matter of a week or so, the Reborn company was able to turn a quarter of the grafted cluster under their influence. The people of this territory hate venturing out of their homes. However, the Reborn company was able to push them out of their comfort zones and influence them to travel through the Golden Road and out into the other territories. He wanted to know how they did that. They must be using some kind of magic spell or illusion, Barkus said to himself. Some kind of love potion, perhaps. After a few days' worth of travel, Barkus arrived in the first settlement where the Reborn company established their territory. Barkus thought he was prepared for it, but the complete change in the settlement brought him into a complete standstill. The houses made out of wood and thatch were still there, but by its side were these large and towering stone buildings under construction. He was not the first tourist that came into this place. After all, the other Golden Road branches all lead to this place before going over to Angora City. So, there were already Rebornians ready to accommodate all his questions and needs. "Hello, sir. Welcome to the first settlement, a new colony of the nation of Reborn," said a perky young catwoman. Barkus whisperat. "Is there a place here that everyone loves to visit?" "Yes," replied the catwoman. "Our newly constructed bathhouse is a must-try for all tourists." In Barkus' mind, that place must be where the Reborn company brainwashed their customers. There must have been something in the water to completely turn normal citizens into fanatics of Reborn. "I'm going to detect magic on the water," Barkus whispered to himself as the Catwoman escorted him to the bathhouse. "Enjoy," she said. Barkus entered the steamy room and saw these large stones arranged to make it look like a natural hot spring in the woods. He concentrated on the water, making him look like an awkward man staring at other naked men wearing only a towel. He chose a shallow part of the bath and used a 4-star spell called Detect Water to see if it had been tampered with just as he guessed. Surprisingly, the spell told him that it was just pure, clean water. Confused, Barkus decided to copy what the other men in the bathhouse were doing and completely soaked himself in the steaming pool. As soon as he did, his body felt a relaxing heat that seemed to massage all his tense muscles. All his plans of investigating the hot springs went out the window the moment he submerged his body onto the therapeutic bathhouse. Barkus didn't know it, but he unknowingly spent a full hour in the bathhouse. By the time he dried himself outside, he saw the sun had already set in the horizon. "What the hell do they put in that water?" he asked himself. "Did you enjoy yourself?" asked the Catamount from earlier. Not that much," Barkus flusteredly replied, with his cheeks still red from the bath. "Would you like to join our communal game sessions?" Barkus was visibly confused. "We Rebornians have introduced fun board games for everyone to enjoy. Chutes and Ladders, Scrabble, and Uno are widely popular for beginners, but we also have some card games that are popular for experienced gamers." Barkus was led into the newly constructed building into an open space where both Rebornian and local tourists alike gathered in small groups playing different kinds of board games. Although he was invited to play, these things looked childish to him, so he refused to play. But then he noticed one group playing cards while drinking some kind of frothy yellow water. What's that?" Barkus asked. "Come join us, my friend. This is beer and poker." Ever since the start of the Golden Road project, Michael noticed that a lot of the Rebornian engineers and the construction workers ended up feeling sad and burnt out at the end of the day. After all, their days and weeks were just made up of going to work, pouring concrete, flattening roads, and waiting for it to dry. Michael forgot that this was a world that didn't have any sort of entertainment for people to enjoy. They didn't have television shows, anime, or even cell phones. To remedy this boredom that they had, he began a social project in which he spread all kinds of board games to see which ones they liked the most. Snakes and Ladders, in particular, were quite famous with the Rebornian construction workers. They played that game while on lunch breaks and during their day offs. However, Lamias weren't quite fond of that for obvious reasons. Turns out, they didn't like snakes all that much, probably because of how much they were compared with each other. But they did like the game Hungry Hungry Hippos because it reminded them of their natural habitat near the rivers. The Dragonborns liked Uno, which added up because they were siblings, so the rivalry certainly added up a lot of the fun. As for the engineers, plain old Reborn chess was their choice for entertainment. The spread of board games was received very well within the Rebornian community. And surprisingly, an unintended side effect of this was that even the other territories they conquered adapted board games into their culture as well. For example, the first settlement saw the construction workers playing a lot of snakes and ladders. One thing led to another, and soon, they were all playing board games during their free time. However, he knew that board games were fun and all, but sometimes this wasn't enough to satisfy people's need for competition. So, he ended up inventing poker for them as well. Creating the cards was easy enough, but he thought that spreading the rules of poker could be a little bit complicated for people. But, as it turned out, that was not the problem he should have thought of. Instead, people picked up on poker really fast, and they became really enthusiastic in playing it all the time. Right now, he was playing poker in the first settlement with Zion, Fudge, Jakku, Grieve, and a red man key. And just as they were about to play their first hand of the night, Michael's shadow ascended from the floor and turned into a shadow orc. This orc whispered to Michael and pointed at the man entering the building. "Sir, that's Barkus, the leader of Barkus Incorporated," the shadow orc told him before disappearing into the shadows. Michael was quite surprised to see Barkus here in the flesh. From what Fudge told him, it seemed that the two twins weren't quite receptive to their entrance into the grafted cluster. He watched as Barkus looked around the room, with wonder and surprise clearly painted on his face. And with the reddish glow on his cheeks, Michael was sure that the man had just finished a rejuvenating session at the bathhouses. Barkus continued to tour around the tables, peering at the different board games that the Reborn company offered. Everyone had fun and tried to get Barkus to play with them, but he refused. Eventually, the guy ended up approaching one of the tables who were also playing poker. It was Butch and his friends, who were all adopted from the Hammerstone Company a few weeks back. What's that?" Barkus asked. "Come join us, my friend. This is beer and poker." Butch shouted, his cheeks reddened from being drunk. Barkus seemed really intrigued with the idea of poker. But Michael knew that those guys were practically veterans in the game. They were the first ones that became quite good at poker upon its introduction. It became their go-to entertainment whenever they had guard duties on the Golden Road construction project. "Guys, don't bully the man," Michael said to them. Butch immediately sobered up upon seeing him. "Boss, we weren't planning on beating the guy for all his money. Just a little bit," he stammered. Barkus' eyes squinted as he looked at Butch. He seemed to have remembered the bald guy from somewhere. "Wait, weren't you the leader of the Hammerstone Company in Angora City?" Barkus screamed. "We buy our armor from your guys. Don't you remember me?" Butch looked at Barkus, but seemed to see 3 images of him at the same time. "Are you, hiccup, an orc too?" Barkus ignored Butch and then turned to Michael. "He called you boss. Then that means you're the owner of Reborn?" Michael shrugged. "I guess I'm haha. Nice to meet you," he said, offering his hand. Barkus took a second to steady himself before he hurriedly shook Michael's hand. "I wasn't expecting to see you so young," Barkus muttered, his eyes still clearly doubtful whether he was seeing the real thing. "I wasn't expecting to see the owner of the famous hashtag 487th ranked company here too. I wasn't, okay, I admit it. I'm spying on you," Barkus said, his head hanging low. "I thought I would expose all the deceit that your company was doing, but I'm wrong. I haven't seen the people of the first settlement look this happy in all the years of my life. They looked satisfied." Michael appreciated the honesty. It looked like this guy wasn't bad at all. "Bro Mike, are we going to play or what?" Zion shouted at Michael from the poker table, clearly impatient. Michael looked at Barkus. "You want to play some poker?" After giving him all the rules he needed to play poker, Barkus joined Michael and the others on the poker table. He was given colorful coins that didn't seem to be any kind of denomination of money that he was familiar with. "Those are chips," Michael explained. "It's what you use to bet." Barkus nodded. He was smart enough and understood enough of the game to play decently. "Dealer, deal the cards." Fudge shouted to the shadow orc on the opposite side of the table. The Orcanine orc looked very distinguished with his black and white suit and well-combed mane. The orc gave each player 2 cards and laid down 5 other cards on the table. The objective of the game was to have the best hand among the given cards on the table. There's a lot of bluffing and guessing involved in the game, which made for some really interesting reactions in the table. I have the best cards on the table. You should all fold and surrender the chips to me, Zion bragged. Ho ho, young one. Mine are the best cards. At least I think so. Grieve took another peek at his cards before affirming his words. Ah, yes, indeed. Ugh, I don't have any good cards, but I'll fight it out, Fudge declared, completely misunderstanding the point of the game. While the other players were talking and bluffing against each other, Barkus was fidgeting in his seat, unable to sit properly. It seemed that something was bothering him so much that he couldn't concentrate on playing the game. In the end, he leaned over to Michael and expressed his thoughts. Are you really planning on spreading the Reborn company in the Grafted cluster? Aren't you afraid of Flare Corp?